Chapter 320. Nietion couldn't help but be slightly taken aback when he saw an enraged old man in luxurious clothes suddenly appear in the distance. What made him even more surprised was that this old man was actually walking together with Gu Yi. If only this old man had appeared, Nietion would absolutely not have stopped and would directly end Luo Fun's little life. But Gu Yi had also appeared, and this caused Nietion to hesitate for a moment. Pooh, feeling the pressure on his chest lessen by quite a bit, Luo Fun spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Obviously, he had also seen the old man, and he couldn't help but laugh as he said, "Nieton, I've already said, you can't kill me. Is that so?" Nietion laughed sinisterly, and then exerted force on his leg, pressing Luo Fun to the point that he spat out another mouthful of fresh blood, and was no longer able to make the slightest sound. "Little bastard, I asked you to stop." When the old man saw that Nietion actually didn't stop, he couldn't help but roar out in rage, and even his hair and beard stood on end. Obviously, he was extremely furious. Nietion didn't even spare the old man a glance, his gaze sweeping past Gu Yi's face. When he saw that the latter's emotions didn't fluctuate in the slightest, the killing intent in his heart became even more resolute. If Luo Fun was related to Gu Yi in any way, then perhaps he could spare his life, but at the very least, his primordial spirit meridians would be crippled, and he wouldn't be able to harm people anymore. At this moment, Nietion was sure that Luo Fun wasn't related to Gu Yi in any way, so how could he care about anything else? The corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile as he roared loudly, "You asked me to stop, but I'm going to kill him." As his deep roar rang out, Nietion didn't hesitate in the slightest. He raised his foot high, and the moment it landed again, it would be the moment of Luo Fun's death. The terror in Luo Fun's eyes suddenly expanded. He'd never thought that when the person to save him had arrived, Nietion would actually attack without even asking who that person was, and was completely unreasonable. "Bastard, stop right now." The old man was completely infuriated by the scene before him. He suddenly roared towards the sky, "Busan, Bu-Si, kill him. Little bastard, you're courting death." In the next moment, two black-clothed figures suddenly appeared in the sky. Their movements were swift, and in the blink of an eye, they attacked at the same time. Two air-piercing forces were like surging waves, bombarding towards Nietion majestically. Nietion was slightly stunned. He was shocked to realize that the two people in the sky were exceptionally strong. They were definitely above Luo Fun. He could not help but frown slightly. What was even more strange was that their auras seemed to be completely hidden. Even Nieton, Old Li, and even Rui Qinyu, who had the 9-colored pupils, did not notice their presence. "Boss, be careful." Only Jean de Bayo, who relied on the Godfiend blood tome, sensed the danger. However, by the time he spoke, it was already too late. Oldley did not know the existence of the two black-clothed men in advance. It was already too late for him to make a move. At this moment, Nietion had already used up all 3 of his star souls. Facing the strong attacks of the two black-clothed men, he could only fight to the death. Roar! Just as the two black-clothed men's attacks were about to land, an earth-shattering roar rang out. It was like the breaking of dawn, with the power to pierce through the clouds and crack rocks. In the next moment, Nietion's body flashed with a red light, and a giant red beast that was 100 meters tall appeared behind him. It was the giant spirit true body formed by the 9th extreme chaos beast. The giant spirit true body of the 9th extreme chaos beast appeared in front of people for the first time. That kind of shocking terror was indescribable. The 9th extreme chaos beast was like a peerless emperor. It looked up to the sky and roared angrily. Instantly, the mountains and rivers shook, and the sun and moon dimmed. The aura of a king that descended on the world made people have the urge to kneel down and worship it. Everyone's expressions were collectively petrified. They stared blankly at the giant beast that stood between heaven and earth. The shock in their hearts was all revealed on their faces. Such a strong aura. At this moment, even Elder Lee's voice was trembling. This was the first time he saw a giant spirit true body of a stage 1 giant spirit martial artist could be so terrifying. That kind of aura that soared into the sky was shocking. Even the two black-clothed men who suddenly appeared could not help but pause when they saw the giant beast in front of them. However, in the next moment, the two of them reacted. Their aura suddenly increased, and they attacked Nietian mercilessly. Bam! Bam! Two loud, dull sounds rang out. The ninth extreme chaos beast's huge body was hit so hard that it took a few steps back. Immediately, its aura dimmed a little, and bright red blood seeped out from the side of its mouth. Nietian himself was also sent flying. He was actually sent flying more than 100 meters away, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. The ninth extreme chaos beast disappeared immediately. Inside the chaos original coffin, there was a trace of blood at the side of Little Nine's mouth. It was obvious that it was not light, but it was not fatal. The light in its eyes also dimmed a little. IF*CK. Gulp. Corpse Demon Lord, who was at the side, was stunned. His throat moved, and he could not react for a long time. At this moment, the shock in Corpse Demon Lord's heart could not be expressed in words. He never expected that the ninth extreme Chaos Beast's first appearance could actually block the joint attack of two true Essence Stage 5 martial artists. "Oh my God!" Corpse Demon Lord exclaimed in his heart. At this moment, Nietian only had the strength of a giant Soul Stage 1, but he actually used the giant Soul True body to block the attack of two true Essence Stage 5 martial artists. This was too unbelievable. This was simply unimaginable. It completely subverted Corpse Demon Lord's understanding of martial arts. If Nietian grew up and reached the true Essence Stage, the Spirit Will Stage, and the Heavenly Evolution Stage, how terrifying would he be? One word: powerful. So powerful that there was no way to counter it. Boss! Big Brother Nietian. Big Brother Nietian. Nietian. Mr. Seeing that Nietian was sent flying, Jean DeBeo, Nyuro, Xiaoling, Tangyu, Qiu Shan, and the others exclaimed in unison. But the next moment, Nietian stood up from the ruins. Although his body was covered in blood, his aura was strong, and he was not seriously injured. The ninth extreme Chaos Beast helped Nietian to bear most of the damage, and he was only affected by the shockwave. Although he looked a little disheveled, he was not seriously injured. At the same time, two figures in black landed and looked at Nietian in the distance. Their four eyes were wide open, and they could not believe the scene in front of them. The two brothers were Bu San and Bu Si, and they were both true Essence Stage 5 martial artists. Bu San and Bu Si thought that any one of them would be able to kill an ordinary true element first layer martial artist with a single strike. Even a true element 5th layer martial artist would lose a layer of his skin if he were to face the combined attack of the two of them just now. But the Nietian in front of them only suffered a superficial wound. Although it looked bloody and scary, it was actually just a minor injury. Bu San and Bu Si looked at each other and took a deep breath at the same time. They felt a chill in their tailbones. Just now, when Nietian had revealed his Titan spirit form, the aura it carried was terrifying. The two of them had seen the giant spirit true body of a rank 7 origin spirit, but it was far less terrifying than the ninth extreme Chaos Beast. There was no doubt that the ninth extreme Chaos Beast was an existence that surpassed a rank 7 origin spirit. It was at least a rank 8 legend, or even a rank 9 supreme. The origin spirit of a rank 9 supreme was enough to overshadow all the martial artists in the 3,000 small worlds. One had to know that MOU, who was known as one of the 3 great monsters of Sumi Ling City, was only a rank 7 legend origin spirit. Chapter 3:21. Bu San and Bu Si thought at the same time. If the young man in front of them was allowed to grow, in less than 20 years or even less than 10 years, he would definitely be in existence at the peak of the 3,000 small worlds. When they thought of this, their faces turned ghastly pale like a sheet of paper. And in the next moment, a cold, killing intent shot out from their eyes at the same time, directly locking onto Nietian. Trash! On the other side, When a well-dressed old man saw that Bu San and Bu Si attacked at the same time and actually failed to kill Nye Tian, he actually let out a cold roar, as if he was reprimanding two useless dogs. Diao Jingde! Just as the well-dressed old man's voice fell, Gu Yi, who was beside him, suddenly roared and actually scolded loudly. Are you Mother * King crazy? Do you know who the person you want to kill is? The face of the old man in luxurious clothes froze, as he'd completely never imagined that Gu Yi's reaction would actually be so great. But right after that, his gaze swept towards Luo Fan, who was still lying on the ground on her last breath, and he instantly became ferocious as he said coldly, I don't care who he is, he must die if he dares to touch Luo Fan. Luo Fan? Gu Yi was stunned. Looking at Luo Fan, who was on the ground struggling at death's door, he suddenly said, He is Luo Fan? Your illegitimate son. Halfway through his sentence, Gu Yi swallowed the second half of the sentence. The well-dressed old man was called Diao Jingde. His identity and position was very high, the same as Gu Yi, one of the 7 red-clothed elders of the Alchemist Guild. Diao Jingde just arrived at Danwu City today, saying that he was very interested in the Dragon Bloodstone and wanted to get a few pieces to research. Although Gu Yi and Diao Jingde's relationship wasn't good, both of them were red-clothed elders of the Alchemist Guild, and at the very least, they still had to have mutual respect. So even if he was 100 unwilling in his heart, Gu Yi still had to entertain him a little. Originally, Gu Yi and Diao Jingde planned to go to Tian Luo Mountain, but who would have thought that they would meet a guard of Tian Luo City on the way, who told Gu Yi that something had happened in Tian Luo City. Gu Yi and Diao Jingde rushed over, just in time to see the scene of Nye Tian about to torture and kill Luo Fan. Perhaps the others would find it strange that Diao Jingde cared so much about Luo Fan's life that he did not hesitate to let the 2 protectors lurking around him show up at the same time to stop Nye Tian from killing him. However, Gu Yi was extremely clear about the reason behind it. On the surface, there was no relationship between Diao Jingde and Luo Fan, but the real relationship between the two was related by blood. Luo Fan was Diao Jingde's illegitimate son. Other than the few red-robed elders of the Alchemist Guild and the president of the Alchemist Guild, no one else knew about this. In his early years, Diao Jingde was a playboy by nature, and he sowed seeds everywhere. Luo Fan was just one of his many illegitimate children, but he was the one he doted on the most. In order to let Luo Fan acknowledge his ancestors and return to the clan, Diao Jingde even made people massacre the Luo Shi clan, which Luo Fan was originally from. Many people thought that it was Luo Fan who massacred his own clansmen, but in actual fact, that was not the case. It was done by Diao Jingde. From then onwards, Luo Fan's character became ruthless and unreasonable, becoming a real ruthless character who killed people without batting an eyelid. The reason why Luo Fan became like this today was all caused by Diao Jingde. Luo Fan had offended quite a number of large powerhouses and killed quite a number of people with status. The reason why he was able to live until now was all because of Diao Jingde, who settled everything for him behind the scenes. After Diao Jingde grew old, his doting towards Luo Fan surpassed everything else, almost to the extent that it reached a kind of abnormal degree. So when he saw that Nye Tian wanted to kill Luo Fan, his entire person was about to explode. Gu Yi had never thought that the person who was causing trouble in Heaven Luo City was actually Luo Fan. In this way, Gu Yi couldn't help but be put in a difficult position. Of course, he wasn't afraid of Diao Jingde, but he knew that the latter was absolutely not a character who could be trifled with. The Alchemist Guild's red-clothed elder, just this identity alone, was not something that ordinary powerhouses dared to provoke. Ha ha! Right at this moment, the bloodied Luo Fan actually crawled up and even laughed maniacally. Nye Tian, I've said it before, you can't kill me. It had to be said that a first-level true essence martial artist physique was really not for show. Luo Fan had directly endured so many solid punches from Nye Tian. Even if it was a piece of iron, it would have turned into molten iron. But this fellow was actually still alive. It was simply too terrifying. Towards Luo Fan being able to live until now, Nyetian didn't feel that it was unexpected. Luo Fun's spirit was a thorny black wood, which belonged to the wood spirit of the three main types of spirit. Compared to beast spirits and weapon spirits, the wood spirit might be slightly weaker in combat, but its defensive power was definitely the strongest. Moreover, the vitality of a wood spirit martial artist was far stronger than a weapon spirit martial artist or a beast spirit martial artist. If Luo Fun was beaten to death in a few punches, that would really be a surprise. "I have this. Do you still dare to kill me?" Luo Fun trembled as he took out a piece of black iron token, his face actually revealing a look of contempt and ridicule. Nyetian saw the token in Luo Fun's hand from afar, and was slightly startled, but immediately smiled coldly. "I don't care what your identity is, even if you're the Emperor of Heaven. You still have to leave your life behind today." He recognized the token in Luo Fun's hand, because he also had one in his hand. The token in Luo Fun's hand was not anything else, but the Alchemist Guild's red-clothed token. Previously, Guki had also given one to Nyetian, but the latter didn't treat it as a big deal. He didn't expect that Luo Fun would take out such a lousy token to scare away Nyetian. It was simply ridiculous. Nyetian didn't care who Luo Fun was, and even more so, didn't care what relationship he had with the Alchemist Guild's red-clothed elder. Even if he was a red-clothed elder himself, there was only one ending for him today, and that was death. Nyetian's body trembled, and an astonishing wave of sword chi washed away all the bloodstains on his body. His entire person looked cold and austere, and his eyes blossomed with a divine light, filled with intense killing intent. He walked towards Luo Fun step by step, and a terrifying killing intent spread out for hundreds of meters. Everyone present could feel this intense killing intent. When Gu Yi saw Nyetian's reaction, his heart skipped a beat. He already knew that today's matter would definitely not end until one of them died. At a certain moment, Gu Yi's gaze swept across Qiu Shan, Qiu Ling the three lay brothers, and only then did he know why Nyetian was so enraged. Luo Fun was indeed arrogant, but unfortunately, this time, he had found the wrong target to be arrogant towards. "Nyetian, what are you trying to do? You still want to kill me? Look carefully. I'm holding the Alchemist Guild's red-clothed token." Feeling Nyetian's killing intent from afar, Luo Fun was so frightened that his teeth chattered, and he used all his might to shake the red-clothed token in his hand, but Nyetian completely ignored him. "Luo Fun, I've said it before, you shouldn't have provoked me." Nyetian walked towards Luo Fun step by step, and every step he took was like a death knell from hell, pounding heavily on his heart. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, no one would believe it. The infamous Luo Fun, who was regarded as a taboo by the younger generation of the Nanshan domain, actually had a time when he was scared to the point of wetting his pants. "Stinking brat, with this master here, I won't allow you to act rashly." At this moment, Diaojingde already knew Nyetian's identity, but he absolutely couldn't watch his son die tragically with his own eyes. With a roar, he looked towards Bu San and Bu Si. Chapter 322. Diaojingde knew that the young man in front of him was Tian Luo City Lord Nyetian, and he also knew that all the dragon bloodstones in Gu Yi's hands were now under his name. Although Gu Yi praised Nyetian to the heavens, in Diaojingde's eyes, Nyetian was just a small city lord of a third-rate empire, not worth mentioning. Therefore, at this moment, Diaojingde had the intention to kill Nyetian. Since there was already enmity, there was no need to think about resolving it. It was better to get rid of him directly. When Bu San and Bu Si heard Diaojingde's roar, they looked at each other and immediately took a step forward. A tyrannical aura rolled over, and they wanted to attack Nyetian again. Unfortunately, they no longer had the chance to make a move. Elderly, who was at the side, did not stand there and watch the show. When Bu San and Bu Si appeared, Elderly did not react. At this moment, how could he let the two of them threaten Nyetian? Get lost. Elderly did not wait for Nyetian to speak. His figure flashed, and his seemingly thin and weak body surged with a huge force. Like an invisible palm, It rolled towards Bu San and Bu Si. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds were heard. Before the two of them could react, they were directly hit by the invisible force and flew out. After landing on the ground, they could not even stand properly. Two bloodstains and two deep pits appeared on the ground. Bu San and Bu Si were experts at the 5th level of True Element. They were indeed considered experts, but in front of Elder Li, a spirit wheel expert, such power was too weak and could not withstand a single blow. The next moment, Bu San and Bu Si climbed out of the deep pit and looked at the thin old man who suddenly appeared in horror. They were about to speak, but when they saw the old man's cold eyes, they were so scared that they swallowed their words. Elderly glanced at the two of them and immediately waved his palm. A dazzling crack appeared on the ground, and he said in a cold voice, "Those who cross this line will be killed without mercy." In fact, with Elder Li's strength, if he wanted to kill the two of them in front of him, it was no different from crushing an ant. However, he had not figured out the identity of the old man behind the two of them, so he did not kill them. But if these two dared to make any strange movements, Elderly would absolutely not have any reservations and would kill them with a single strike. Jiao Jingde looked at Elderly, and his face couldn't help but twitch when he noticed the latter's strength. He was so worried about Luo Fun's safety that he didn't notice that there was a spirit wheel stage expert beside him. Tianluo City was just a small city at the border of a third-rate empire. Normally, it was rare to see a giant spirit realm expert, but today, a spirit wheel realm expert had appeared, which was very unusual. The strength of a spirit wheel expert was equivalent to the pinnacle figures of a first-rate empire. "Who are you?" Jiao Jingde looked at Old Li coldly and asked. Elderly ignored him and didn't even look at him. The corner of Jiao Jingde's mouth twitched, and he quickly stepped forward. When he arrived at the taboo line on the ground, a strong force swept over and directly sent him flying. "You dare attack me? Do you know who I am?" After Jiao Jingde landed on the ground, he quickly stabilized his body and looked at Elderly in disbelief. He was a dignified, red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. Even the people from the 4 major families wouldn't dare to attack him casually. This old man who appeared out of nowhere actually attacked him directly, which was unacceptable to him. At this moment, Elderly looked at Jiao Jingde coldly and said, "I don't care who you are. I have already said it. Whoever crosses this line will be killed without mercy." Elderly had already shown mercy. He could tell that Jiao Jingde's status wasn't low. Walking together with Gu Yi, they were actually on equal footing, so he must be an important figure in the Alchemist Guild. The Alchemist Guild was definitely a colossus that couldn't be provoked. If it wasn't for this layer of fear in his heart, Jiao Jingde definitely wouldn't have landed unscathed. At this moment, Nie Tian had already walked to Luo Fun's side. The gloomy, killing intent from his body made the latter almost unable to breathe. "Nie Tian, you can't kill me." Luo Fun retreated continuously, and the fear in his eyes gradually turned into despair. It was only at this moment that he knew that Nie Tian was a person who was even more insolent than him. Don't kill me." Nie Tian walked closer step by step. Luo Fun was like a pitiful little kitten with a helpless face. "Nie Tian, stop." Seeing that Luo Fun was in danger, Jiao Jingde roared loudly. He didn't care anymore and directly threatened, "I am the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild, Jiao Jingde. If you dare to kill Luo Fun, I will definitely not let you off." SSSSS. When Jiao Jingde's words landed, everyone's gaze couldn't help but look over. It's actually the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. Why would he appear here? That's right. Why would he want to save Luo Fun? In the past, I have never heard of Luo Fun having any relationship with the Alchemist Guild. No matter what, this time, Nie Tian City Lord won't be able to kill Luo Fun. How hateful. That's right, the identity of the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild is too big. Not someone that Nie Tian City Lord can afford to offend. When Nie Tian heard what Jiao Jingde said, his body paused for a moment. Soon after, he looked over. There wasn't any fear in his eyes, only extreme anger. At this moment, he finally understood why Luo Fun was actually able to live until now despite being so arrogant. It was definitely because Diao was supporting him from behind. Who would have thought that the arrogant and ruthless Luo Fun was actually a young master? If not for Diao the big boss behind him, Luo Fun would have long been dismembered into pieces. Don't you want him to die? Nietian looked at Diao and asked in a cold tone. When Diao looked at Nietian's eyes, he actually felt an indescribable shiver, as though he was a little sheep being stared at by a ferocious wolf. The instant fear made him feel as though he had fallen into an abyss. Diao felt strange in his heart. Why was his kid's eyes so calm? Why did he feel fear? Illusion? It must be an illusion. Diao comforted himself in his heart, and at the same time, he calmed down and put on a calm face. Nitian City Lord, I want to save Luo Fun. Please give me some face. I will definitely remember this favor of yours. Give you some face? Nie Tianling laughed coldly. The killing intent in his eyes became even more intense. He had seen countless people in his past life. How could he not guess what Diao was thinking at this moment? If Nie Tian let Luo Fun go today, Diao would definitely not remember any favor. What he would do was to immediately find someone to kill Nie Tian. A person like Diao had a heart of a snake and scorpion. He would definitely not allow anyone who was a threat to him to live. Yes, let Luo Fun go. We will be friends in the future. How about that? When Diao saw Nie Tian hesitating, he thought that the latter was tempted. After all, to let the red-robed elder of the Alchemist Association owe him a big favor. This was definitely a very tempting condition. Nie Tian's brows twitched, his face instantly sank, and he scolded coldly. I'm sorry, your face is not big enough. Bang! In the next moment, Nie Tian didn't even care about Diao reaction. He took a step forward and directly pulled Luo Fun over like a little chick. He actually raised his knee and hit the latter's lower abdomen. The latter's waist bent, and his whole body flew up like a rubber ball. Didn't Diao want to save Luo Fun? Chapter 323. Fanner. Just as Luo Fun was sent flying into the sky by Nie Tian, a hysterical voice rang out. It was Diao. Watching his own son being tortured and killed like a dog, this kind of heartache, if one did not experience it personally, one would not be able to imagine. Gulp! Gu Yi, who was at the side, also gulped. His expression was stiff. He did not expect that when Diao revealed his identity as a red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild, Nie Tian did not care at all. It was as if in Nie Tian's eyes, the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild was no different from an ordinary person. Indeed, Nie Tian did not put a mere red-clothed elder in his eyes at all. It was not an exaggeration to say that even if the person standing in front of him today was the president of the Alchemist Guild, or the clan leaders of the four great families, he would definitely kill Luo Fun. Just based on what Luo Fun did to Qiushan and the others. Even if the god of heaven came today, he would not be able to escape death. Jean de Bao also looked at Nie Tian with a stiff expression. He knew that Nie Tian was arrogant, but he did not expect him to be arrogant to this extent. Not only did he ignore the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild, he even provoked the latter in a brutal way. The red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. That was a figure that stood at the top of the 3,000 small worlds. Bang! Luo Fun fiercely smashed onto the ground, stirring up a cloud of dirt. Nie Tian. Diao was completely enraged. He pointed at Nie Tian and shouted, I order you to stop immediately. The red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild is not someone you can afford to offend. A fierce light shone in Nie Tian's eyes as he ignored Luo Fun completely. With a roar, he stomped the ground and sent Luo Fun flying like a wild beast. Then, he raised his hand and threw a punch at Luo Fun. Bang! 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 Ah! The muffled sound continued. Amidst the splattering of blood, Luo Fun's face completely collapsed. His eyes bulged out, and the blood vessels in his eyes became clear and lost their luster. Diao was completely dumbfounded. He stood rooted to the ground like a stone man, unable to react for a long time. Fanner. At a certain moment, Diao Jingde suddenly sensed that Luo Fen was no longer breathing. His entire body trembled, and the light in his eyes dissipated. It was as if all his beliefs had collapsed in an instant, and he was filled with despair. Luo Fen, his son, his most beloved son, had actually been beaten to death in front of him like a dog being abused. Diao Jingde couldn't accept the scene before him. Diao Jingde suddenly let out a pained roar. His voice was trembling, his heart was trembling, his whole being was trembling. Without a doubt, this was the trembling of rage. All the onlookers froze at this moment. Everything that happened today would be engraved in their minds forever. The #1 genius of the Nanshan region had died just like that. He had been beaten to death by Nie Tian's fists. It was too shocking, too bloody. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would believe it? Who would dare to believe it? Especially the fact that Nie Tian ignored Diao Jingde's threat. It was really domineering. In the entire 3,000 small worlds, there were only a handful of people who directly ignored the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. There was no doubt that after today, when this matter spread, Nie Tian's name would resound throughout the entire Nanshan region. Even Sumi Ling capital would know this name. Nie Tian, you kill my son. I want you to pay with your life. Diao Jingde lost his mind in anger. He actually madly rushed towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian was slightly stunned and immediately slashed with his sword. The sword chi shrouded over, forming a sword net, firmly trapping Diao Jingde. Although Diao Jingde was a 6th-stage alchemist, he only had the strength of the Wanxiang 9th tier. If it was a head-on battle, he would be completely useless. Grandmaster Diao, Bu San and Bu Si exclaimed at the same time, looking at the scene in front of them in surprise. They really didn't expect that Nie Tian was actually arrogant to this extent. He actually attacked the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild in front of everyone's eyes. The two's hearts jumped to their throats, but they didn't dare to act rashly. Elderly was staring at them from the side. He was definitely not looking at a painting. Nie Tian, don't kill him. At this time, Gu Yi also exclaimed. His old face was purple with fear. Nie Tian killing Luo Fen only offended Diao Jingde. To put it bluntly, this was a personal grudge between him and Diao Jingde. If Nie Tian killed Diao Jingde in public, then it was absolutely two different things. Who was Diao Jingde? The red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. If he died in the hands of Nie Tian, then it was equivalent to Nie Tian directly declaring war on the Alchemist Guild. Killing a red-clothed elder in public. Forget about Nie Tian, a small city lord of a third-rate empire. Even the patriarchs of the 4 great families absolutely wouldn't dare to do so. If Diao Jingde really died in the hands of Nie Tian, then even if he had the 4 great families behind him, this matter would definitely not be good. It was precisely because of the special identity of the red-clothed elder that Gong Lingyi, a true Essence 9th level expert, could only obediently pretend to be a grandson when he saw Gu Yi. If Nie Tian killed Luo Fen, Gu Yi could help him deal with it and not let the Alchemist Guild's power get involved. But if he killed Diao Jingde, there would be no room for turning back this matter. When Nie Tian heard Gu Yi's reminder, his hands suddenly stopped. The corner of his mouth suddenly raised into a ruthless smile and said coldly, I don't care who you are. If you dare to provoke me again, I will still kill you. Nie Tian was an alchemist in his previous life and was also one of the elders of the Heaven Realm Alchemist Guild. Of course, he knew the strength of the Alchemist Guild. He didn't want to kill Diao Jingde. He just wanted to scare the latter. Even though Nie Tian didn't put Diao Jingde in his eyes, he also didn't want to offend the Alchemist Guild because of such a person. If he angered the Alchemist Guild, just based on Nie Tian's current strength, he definitely wouldn't be able to bear the serious consequences. He was afraid that at that time, he would really have to call Tang Hao to clean up the mess. Thinking of this, the imposing aura around Nie Tian's body dissipated and the sword net disappeared, allowing Diao Jingde to breathe a sigh of relief. Nie Tian. Diao Jingde's old face flushed red, but his emotions had stabilized a lot. He turned around and looked at Luo Fen's corpse. The viciousness in his eyes was indescribable. Nie Tianling looked at Diao Jingde, his heart filled with doubt. This kind of trash, how could he climb up to the position of a red-clothed elder? You kill my son. Between us, we won't rest until we die. The muscles on Jiao Jingda's face twitched, and his entire person lost the sharpness from before, as if he had aged 10 years. After saying the last 4 words, Jiao Jingda suddenly turned around and growled to Bu San Bu Si, who was beside him. Bring Pink Er's corpse. Let's go. Yes. Bu San Bu Si replied, and glanced at Elderly from the corner of their eyes. It was obvious that they were extremely afraid. Nie Tian didn't care about them, and slowly walked towards Qiu Shan and the rest. A soul-stirring drama ended just like that. Until Jiao Jingda's figure disappeared, the surrounding crowd still didn't react for a long time. At this time, Gui walked to Nie Tian's side, his face carrying a bit of fear and worry, and said, Nie Tian, Jiao Jingda is a vicious and merciless person. He will definitely take revenge for the smallest grievance. You killed his illegitimate son. You must be careful in the future. Chapter 324. 3 days later, Danwu City. Although the incident of Nie Tian torturing and killing Luo Fan had already passed for 3 days, the impact it brought did not diminish in the slightest. In the streets and alleys, in the taverns and tea houses, everyone was discussing this matter. The Nie Tian city lord is really too domineering. Just one move, and he crippled Luo Fan, that dog. Later on, he even tortured him to death with his fists. It's really too satisfying. What do you know? Don't talk nonsense here. Your father was at the scene at that time and saw with my own eyes that the Nie Tian city lord just moved his little finger, and then Luo Fan, that fellow, collapsed. He didn't even need a single move. I heard that when the Nie Tian city lord killed Luo Fan, his biological father was at the scene. I wonder if it's true or false. Of course it's true. Luo Fan's biological father is the Alchemist Association's red-clothed elder, Master Jiao Jingda. At that time, Master Jiao Jingda had already threatened the Nie Tian city lord that he wouldn't rest until he was dead. Unfortunately, he still couldn't save Luo Fan. I have to say, the Nie Tian city lord is really domineering. Sigh. I really didn't expect that Luo Fan, that fellow, is usually arrogant and despotic. Turns out that his biological father's background is so great. No wonder nobody dared to do anything to him. So what if his biological father's background is great? Wasn't he still slaughtered like a pig by the Nie Tian city lord? In Danwu City's largest tavern, Yuan Feng Tavern, everyone discussed one after another. Their words were all in favor of Nie Tian, because Luo Fan's reputation was seriously too stinky. Although they were talking very happily, they were just blindly joining in the fun. At this moment, in a corner of the tavern, a boy and a girl sat quietly. Hearing everyone's discussions, their faces were filled with astonishment. If Nie Tian were here, he would immediately recognize that these two people were none other than Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner. Last time in the Bloody Slaughter ancient tomb, the two siblings had listened to Nie Tian's advice and finally managed to escape with their lives. However, as soon as they left the tomb, they were taken away by his father, Duanmu Bai, who was waiting in the Bloody Demon Valley. Furthermore, he was grounded in the Qingquan Palace and was not allowed to go out. This time, when they came to Heaven Luo City, the siblings still sneaked out. This time, Duanmu Bai's father would probably be so angry that his head would explode. Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner could definitely be said to be a cheating duo. Brother, is what they said true? Brother Nie Tian really killed Luo Fan? Is Luo Fan really the son of Master Jiao Jingda? Duanmu Weiner frowned, wrinkles forming on her forehead. Although she knew that Nie Tian was very strong, Luo Fan was the #1 genius in the South Mountain region's genius ranking. How could he just die like that? Moreover, he died so easily, as if he was killed by Nie Tian without being able to fight back. Duanmu Lu thought hard and did not know how to answer. Finally, he said, "Let's go to the city lord's mansion and pay a visit to our benefactor. Then, we will know everything." Duanmu Lu's hair stood on end when he heard this. Previously in the Bloody Slaughter ancient tomb, Nie Tian only had the strength of the manifestation realm. If he could really kill Luo Fun, how fast would his strength increase? Brother's right. Let's go see Brother Nyetion now. Duanmu Wainer giggled and immediately stood up, ready to go to the city lord's mansion of Heaven Luo City immediately. At the same time, in a private room near the window on the second floor of the restaurant, 3 gazes had already locked on the Duanmu siblings. They were 3 young martial artists in white. 2 of them were sitting and 1 was standing. One of the people sitting was a familiar face. It was Dongfang Du. Sitting opposite Dongfang Du was a handsome young man. He looked to be 17 or 18 years old, and his face was full of arrogance. And, standing like a servant, was Chu Shifeng. Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng did not die in the bloody slaughter ancient tomb. With the help of the purple fire, they managed to survive. Chu Shifeng was poisoned by Dongfang Du's blood needles and successfully changed from the eldest disciple of Qinquan Palace to the latter's dog. Chu Shifeng had no other way. There was no antidote for the blood needle's poison in his body. Only Dongfang Du's blood could prolong his life. He did not want to die, so he could only dare to be a servant by Dongfang Du's side. Brother Dongfang, to be able to make the eldest disciple of Qinquan Palace be your servant. Your method is really brilliant. I admire you. The arrogant young man glanced at Chu Shifeng with a slightly surprised look. Brother Gu, you flatter me. I am also quite surprised that Chu Shifeng is willing to be my servant. This is probably my personal charm. Dongfang Du said without blushing. He glanced at Chu Shifeng and said, Chu Shifeng, do you think I am right? Master is right. Chu Shifeng bowed respectfully, looking like a servant. To be able to follow Master is the blessing of West Wind. The arrogant young man was slightly taken aback, an undisguised look of disdain on his face, and then immediately said with an awkward smile, the eldest disciple of the palace lord of Qinquan Palace, the 3rd genius of the Southern Mountain region, is willing to be someone's servant. It is really surprising. The arrogant young man was obviously not stupid. He guessed that Dongfang Du must have something on Chu Shifeng. Otherwise, with Chu Shifeng's talent and identity, it was absolutely impossible for him to be willing to be a servant. The arrogant young man was called Gu Qiulin, not from the Southern Mountain region, but from Su Mi-Ling City. This time he appeared in Tianluo City, of course, for the Dragon Bloodstone. The name Gu Qiulin was not famous, because he had a famous big brother, Gu Qiulong. Gu Qiulong was one of the 3 great evildoers of Su Mi-Ling City. So although Gu Qiulin was also a young genius, his glory was completely overshadowed by his evildoer big brother. This time in Tianluo City, in addition to obtaining the Dragon Bloodstone, Gu Qiulin also wanted to take advantage of the opportunity of the Dragon Blood Martial meeting to make a name for himself. He did not want to always hide behind Gu Qiulong and be a supporting character. In fact, Gu Qiulin was indeed a martial arts genius. At the age of 17, he was already at the 9th level of the Giant Spirit Realm. Although this talent was a little worse than MOU, this evildoer level genius, but it was still absolutely amazing. Dongfang Du naturally knew that Gu Qiulin did not believe his and Dongfang Du's nonsense, but still smiled and said, everyone has their own ambitions. Master, the Duanmu brother and sister are about to leave. At this time, Chu Shifeng saw that Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Wainer were about to leave the restaurant, so he quickly reminded them. Brother Gu, I still have some things to do. Goodbye. Dongfang Du cupped his hands towards Gu Qiulin and was ready to leave. Ever since he entered the restaurant, he had been eyeing the Duanmu brother and sister. The God-transforming sect and the Qinquan Palace were both the top forces in the Nanshan region, and at the same time, they were also incompatible with each other. If he could kill Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Wainer, it would be a huge blow to the Qinquan Palace Master and the future of the Qinquan Palace. The Duanmu brother and sister were alone, and there were no experts around to protect them. How could Dongfang Du let go of such a good opportunity? Of course, Gu Qiulin knew what Dongfang Du was going to do. He faintly smiled and said, Brother Dongfang, I am very interested in what you're going to do next. How about I follow you and be a spectator? You are very welcome. Dongfang Du smiled happily. His eyes were locked on the Duanmu brother and sister from afar, and his killing intent was revealed. However, What Dongfang Du and others did not know was that while they were staring at the Duanmu brother and sister, several eyes were also staring at them from the luxury box on the third floor. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. These orioles hiding behind were not others, but Niet Tan, Aoki Lily, and Ding Yifan. Chapter 325. The reason why Niet Tian and the rest would appear at Yuan Feng Restaurant was a complete coincidence. Niet Tian found Aoki Yuri and Ding Yifan's siblings to discuss matters regarding the Dragon Blood Martial meet a few days later. Yuan Feng Restaurant was opened by the Dayuan Chamber of Commerce, so Aoki Yuri brought Niet Tian here. Aoki Yuri and Ding Yifan both looked at Niet Tian with a somewhat strange gaze at this time. After they learned of the matter of Niet Tian torturing and killing Luo Fun, they were directly dumbfounded. Luo Fun, that was an outstanding figure of the Nanshan region's younger generation, a taboo figure. To actually be killed by Niet Tian, it was simply inconceivable. The current Ding Yifan no longer dared to underestimate Niet Tian, especially when Niet Tian's current strength was already at the first level of giant spirit. He absolutely had the strength to instantly kill him. Aoki Yuri's attitude towards Niet Tian was also clearly much more respectful, no longer daring to casually release her bewitching aura to probe Niet Tian. Niet Tian, City Lord, you know them? Ding Yifan saw that Niet Tian kept staring at Gu Qiulin and the rest and could not help asking. Niet Tian smiled faintly and said, I know too. Niet Tian came to Danwu City alone this time. Qiu Shan and the three Lei brothers had not recovered from their injuries, especially Qiu Shan, who lost his left arm and became a one-armed saber user. Niet Tian was prepared to find a suitable left arm for Qiu Shan after the Dragon Blood Martial meet. In the near future, he could only inconvenience him to be a one-armed person. As for the others, Niet Tian made them stay in the City Lord Manor and not go out. Luo Fun was dead. Jiao Jingde would definitely take revenge. Hence, Niet Tian had to be careful in his actions from now on. The City Lord Manor had Elder Li and Rui Qianyu, so it was very safe. City Lord Nye, do you have a grudge with Dongfang Du? Aoki Yuri sensed a hint of killing intent in Niet Tian's smile and asked directly. Niet Tian didn't hide it and said, I had some conflicts with him in the ancient Bloody Tomb. Seeing Chu Shifeng and Dongfang Du together, Niet Tian already knew that this guy had become Dongfang Du's slave. He wondered what the palace lord of Qinquan Palace, Duanmu Bai, would think when he saw this scene. His eldest direct disciple, whom he had painstakingly nurtured, had actually become a barking dog of the enemy. This kind of feeling was definitely not a good one. A pair of children were the ones who deceived their father, and a disciple was the one who deceived his teacher. Duanmu Bai was really unlucky. Let's go. Niet Tian saw Dongfang Du and the others walking out. In a flash, he followed them. Aoki Lily and Ding Yifan exchanged glances and immediately followed. Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner rushed out of Yuan Feng Restaurant in high spirits. They were very happy and didn't feel that danger was approaching them step by step. Dongfang Du and the others secretly followed them. When they saw the Duanmu siblings walking into a small alley, they couldn't help but sneer and spat out two words, do it. Brother Dongfang, we are in Danwu City. Are you going to kill people here? Gu Qiulin was slightly stunned and said with a frown. Danwu City was a place under the jurisdiction of the Alchemist Guild. If they were discovered, it would be bad. Dongfang Du chuckled and said, just two little loaches. Killing them is just a matter of a blink of an eye. After killing them, we will destroy their corpses and ensure that no one will know. Brother, do you think Big Brother Niet Tian has forgotten that he still owes us 2 drops of dragon blood? If he doesn't acknowledge it, it will be bad. Duanmu Weiner didn't sense the danger at all. She was actually worried that Niet Tian would renege on her 2 drops of dragon blood. When they were in the Bloody Massacre ancient tomb, the Duanmu siblings used the true crystal to exchange for 2 drops of dragon blood from Niet Tian. Even if Niet Tian urgently needed dragon blood to extend Rui Qianyu's life, how could he renege on a mere 2 drops of dragon blood? One benefactor isn't that kind of person. Duanmu Lu had a solemn expression and seemed a little unhappy. Duanmu Weiner pouted and said, I'm just saying. Don't talk nonsense. Duanmu Lu became even more solemn and said, Benefactor's kindness to us is as heavy as a mountain. He has saved our lives twice. Even if we don't want the dragon blood, we can't forget this kindness. If a person can't distinguish between kindness and grudges, how is he different from a beast? Duanmu Lu's words were sharp, and his whole body naturally released a righteous aura. In this world where strength was respected, people like Duanmu Lu who knew how to repay kindness were really rare. Okay, you're right, okay? Anyway, you have a lot of principles. Duanmu Weiner had a helpless expression. Suddenly, she thought of something and said with a worried expression, I wonder how eldest senior brother is now? Big brother Nyetion didn't let him enter that passage, but he insisted on entering it. I wonder if he's alive or not. Duanmu Lu frowned slightly and said, Wanner, I think eldest senior brother has changed. He's not the eldest senior brother of the past. Duanmu Lu was not too stupid. When they were in the bloody massacre ancient tomb, he had already noticed that something was wrong with Chu Shifeng. He just didn't say it. Changed? Duanmu Weiner was stunned and immediately shook her head. I don't think so. You're about to die, but you're still worried about your eldest senior brother. It seems that Miss Wanner is really devoted to Chu Shifeng. At this moment, a gloomy voice sounded behind the two of them. Immediately, 3 figures appeared. They were Dongfang Du, Chu Shifeng, and Gu Qiulin. Eldest senior brother, you're still alive. Duanmu Weiner raised her head and saw Chu Shifeng. Her first reaction was a look of joy. When Chu Shifeng saw Duanmu Weiner's reaction, a hint of hesitation flashed across his face. Dongfang Du raised his eyebrows and chuckled. Duanmu Weiner, you're really silly to the point of being cute. That old fellow Duanmu Bai is also quite a character. How did he give birth to such an idiotic daughter like you? Gu Qiulin also frowned and shook his head at the side. The arrogance on his face was mixed with unconcealable contempt. Duanmu Weiner was really too naive. Even at this time, she still had an innocent and cute look. Wanner, Duanmu Lu noticed that the 3 people's gazes were not right. He pulled Duanmu Weiner over and protected her behind him. He shouted, What do you want? Duanmu Lu shouted to attract the others. This was Danwu City after all. Dongfang Du and the others absolutely did not dare to be too presumptuous. Unfortunately, he was too childish. Dongfang Du dared to waste time with them. He was naturally prepared. Gu Qiulin had long set up a restriction spirit array within a few hundred meters around them. Even if they fought until the sky turned dark, the people outside the spirit array would not be able to hear or see anything. Gu Qiulin was not only talented in the martial Dao, he was also quite accomplished in the Dao of spirit arrays. He was only 17 years old and was already a Tier 3 spirit array master. But even so, his brilliance was still dim compared to Gu Qiulin. Dongfang Du glanced at Gu Qiulin and said in his heart, Bringing this guy along is indeed not bad. Not only did he set up a restriction spirit array for me, the key is that his identity is not ordinary. The Gu family is one of the 4 great families. Even if he was discovered by Dan Wu City's people, with his identity, he would not receive any punishment. The Gu family, like the Tang family and the Mo family, was one of the 4 great families of the 3,000 Small Worlds. Chapter 326. Big Xixiang, why are you with Dongfang Du? Duanmu Weiner finally sensed that something was wrong and asked in surprise. Fortunately, Duanmu Lu was not stupid. He pulled Duanmu Wanner back, looked at Chu Shifeng, and said angrily, Wanner, he is no longer our eldest apprentice brother. Humph. Dongfang Du sneered and turned to Chu Shifeng. Chu Shifeng, you do it. Don't go easy on your little junior brother and little junior sister. Yes, master. Chu Shifeng agreed without hesitation. He looked at Duanmu Weiner and Duanmu Weiner coldly, and a thick, killing intent shrouded them. Big Xixiang, you... Duanmu Weiner still hadn't reacted. Just when she wanted to say something, Chu Shifeng had already made his move. Junior brother, junior sister. I'm sorry. I have to live on. Don't blame me. Chu Shifeng roared, and the sky splitter halberd appeared in his hand. With a flick of the halberd, a blazing flame appeared, causing the surrounding temperature to rise. Heavenly flame blast. With a loud roar, the sky splitter halberd shot out a huge fireball. The air couldn't withstand the high temperature and turned into a dense mist. Wanderer, back off. Duanmu Lu sensed the suffocating danger and shouted. A black heavy sword appeared behind him and emitted a strong sword chi. The black sword chi whizzed out, intending to resist Chu Shifeng's attack. After coming out of the ancient bloody tomb, Duanmu Lu refined the blood chi he absorbed in the soul-gathering blood pool, and his strength increased to the second level of the giant spirit. Even so, his strength was still far from Chu Shifeng's. The latter had the strength of the 8th level of the giant spirit. Junior brother, you want to fight me with this blunt sword spirit that hasn't been unsealed? Ridiculous. When Chu Shifeng saw the black heavy sword on Duanmu Lu's back, he couldn't help but laugh. He said coldly, 8 extremities Kunwu. If you don't break the seal, you're a piece of trash. The black heavy sword behind Duanmu Lu was his primordial spirit, and it was called the 8 extremities Kunwu. The 8 extremities Kunwu was 4 meters long even without the giant spirit true form. However, it looked very blunt. Rather than calling it a sword, it would be better to call it a heavy square ruler. The 8 extremities Kunwu was born with the 8 extremities sword seal. If the sword seal was not opened, the true power of the 8 extremities Kunwu could never be unleashed. Duanmu Bai had once searched for experts, sealers, and swordsmen, wanting to break the 8 supreme sword seal on Duanmu Lu's 8 supreme Kunwu sword. Unfortunately, everyone who had seen the 8 supreme sword seal shook their heads, indicating that there was no way. Even Sumi Ling Capital's Sword Dao Grandmaster was helpless. Even Lin Yiqing, who was famous for being able to recognize all treasures, couldn't tell what kind of seal the 8 supreme sword seal was. Lin Yiqing was Lin Yifang's elder brother and the head of the Lin family. Even he couldn't see through the seal, so Duanmu Bai could only give up. Therefore, until now, Duanmu Lu's 8 extremities Kunwu primordial spirit was an unopened blunt sword. Boom! A huge fireball bombarded over, and the rolling fire waves scorched Duanmu Lu's delicate face. However, he didn't retreat at all, because Duanmu Weiner, his sister, was behind him. Die! Chu Shifeng let out a sinister laugh, and the aura of his body skyrocketed again. Chu Shifeng, you're really cruel and unscrupulous. At this critical moment, a roar suddenly came from afar. As the voice fell, a sword chi instantly attacked and landed in front of Duanmu Lu, condensing into a sword shadow shield. The huge fireball bombarded on the sword shadow shield, and the fierce impact forced Duanmu Lu to retreat again and again. However, the sword shadow shield blocked the blazing attack, so he wasn't injured. In the next moment, a figure landed beside Duanmu Lu. It was Nie Tian. Nie Tian. Seeing the face of the person who suddenly appeared, Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng exclaimed at the same time. Gu Qiulin was also slightly stunned. He immediately thought of something and asked, "You Nie Tian? You broke through my spirit restriction array?" Nie Tian curled his lips into a smile, glanced at Gu Qiulin, and said with a flat tone, "Do you think a third-grade spiritual formation can stop me?" Then, Nie Tian's gaze shifted to the surprised Dongfang Du, and finally fell on Chu Shifeng. He scolded Duanmu Lu in a cold voice. What Duanmu Lu said just now was right. A person who can't distinguish between gratitude and hatred is no different from an animal. You received Duanmu Bai's kindness of nurturing and teaching, but not only did you not think of repaying, you even coveted the position of Qinquan Palace's palace master. Now you even want to kill your junior brother and junior sister. A cruel and unscrupulous thing like you is worse than an animal. Just now, Duanmu Lu's words were heard by Nie Tian. In order to survive, Chu Shifeng actually tried to kill his junior brother and junior sister who grew up with him. Such behavior was no different from an animal. Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng looked at Nie Tian with unconcealable fear in their eyes. Back at the Bloody Massacre ancient tomb, Nie Tian could already fight against the two of them alone. At that time, Nie Tian's strength was at the 9th level of the All-Manifestation realm. Now that he was at the first level of the giant spirit realm, his combat strength had definitely increased by several times. Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng knew that they were no match for Nie Tian, so they couldn't help but subconsciously take 2 steps back. At this time, Dongfang Du believed that the matter of Nie Tian torturing and killing Luo Fun was definitely true. Luo Fun, the #1 genius of the Nanshan region, even died in the hands of Nie Tian. How could Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng dare to act rashly? What? Brother Dongfang, are you very afraid of him? Gu Qiulin sensed Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng's fear and couldn't help frowning slightly. Shortly after, he chuckled lightly and looked at Nie Tian with eyes full of provocation, saying, "A mere first-level giant spirit realm trash. Is it worth it for you to be so afraid?" Gu Qiulin was already very unhappy that Nie Tian had broken his 3rd-level restrictive spiritual array just now. In addition, Nie Tian appeared very domineering, making him even more jealous. At this time, he already knew Nie Tian's identity. Of course, he had also heard of the matter of Nie Tian torturing and killing Luo Fun. But Gu Qiulin believed that such a matter was most likely exaggerated. Moreover, he had seen Luo Fun before. He was a first-level true essence realm martial artist and was very powerful. To say that he was killed by this first-level giant spirit realm youth, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Nie Tian faintly glanced at Gu Qiulin and sensed that the latter's strength wasn't weak. He was actually a 9th-level giant spirit realm martial artist. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised and asked, "You are from Sumi Spirit City? So what if I am?" Gu Qiulin crossed his arms in front of his chest, full of arrogance. Nie Tian shook his head slightly, but didn't say anything. He was too lazy to say anything. Nie Tian had seen too many arrogant young masters like Gu Qiulin. He really didn't want to waste time with him. Then, the figures of Ao Kiki Lily and Ding Yi Fun also appeared. The two glanced at Dongfang Du and the others and were very surprised. Why were these people so obedient in front of Nie Tian? "Let's go." Nie Tian didn't want to waste time and turned to leave. Although he really wanted to take the lives of Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng to vent his hatred, this was Danwu City after all. If the spirit array was broken, people would notice very quickly. It really wasn't a good place to kill people. Danwu City was Gu Yi's territory. He should at least give him some face. Moreover, Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng weren't weak, and their status wasn't low either. With this Gu Qiulin, if they really fought, it would be hard to avoid some trouble. Therefore, Nie Tian chose to keep the peace. Anyway, the Duanmu siblings weren't injured. Chapter 327. Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. He looked back at Gu Qiulin and said with a faint smile, "If I want to leave, can you stop me?" As he spoke, Nie Tian glanced at Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng. The two of them were so frightened that they shivered and subconsciously hid behind Gu Qiulin. Gu Qiulin frowned even more. He really couldn't understand why Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng, who were the most outstanding youths in the Nanshan region, would be so afraid of the young man in front of him. He didn't know that Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng had teamed up to fight Nie Tian in the bloody massacre ancient tomb. In the end, the two of them had almost died. At that time, Nie Tian was just an all-creation warrior. Now, he was a giant spirit warrior, and his battle strength was many times stronger. Therefore, even if Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng were 100 times more courageous, they still wouldn't dare to provoke Nie Tian, let alone fight Nie Tian head-on. "You want to leave? I will stop you." Gu Qiulin didn't believe that Nie Tian was so powerful. His eyes instantly became cold and murderous. It was obvious that he was going to attack. Benefactor, Duanmu Lu was a little nervous. He was afraid that he would implicate Nie Tian. "All of you step back." Nie Tian smiled faintly and signaled for the others to step back. Ao Kiki Yuri glanced at Nie Tian, looking a little worried. She sent a voice transmission to Nie Tian, "City Lord Nie, this person might be from the 4 big families. It's best not to hurt him." She was indeed worried, but not for Nie Tian's safety. She was worried that Nie Tian would hurt Gu Qiulin. Although Gu Qiulin was not very famous, Aoki Eureka guessed his identity from the dark green Shielan jade pendant on his waist. It was very likely that he was from the Gu family. The four great clans were not to be trifled with. It would be troublesome if their disciples were killed. Nietian had just offended the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. If he were to offend the four great families, the Heaven Luo city would really become the target of public criticism. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing," Nietian replied with a faint smile. He also knew that Gu Qiulin was from Su Mi's spirit capital, so he had no intention of killing him. More importantly, Nietian could sense the presence of experts in the surroundings. They should be people who were secretly following Gu Qiulin to protect him. The disciples of these aristocratic families would always be followed by a group of dark guards wherever they went. These secret guards usually wouldn't come out. Only when their master's life was in danger would they come out to save him. The most important thing for a dark guard was to be secretive. If they were to show up casually, then the dark guard could just become a follower and follow them. Why would they need to hide? The aristocratic families let their disciples out to gain experience, but they were worried that they would be in danger, so they arranged dark guards to protect them at all times. Under normal circumstances, even these aristocratic families themselves didn't know about the existence of the dark guards. "You're courting death." Seeing that Nietian had a smile on his face and did not put him in his eyes, Gu Qiulin's heart was even more furious. With a sharp whistle, a huge black sword that was tens of meters long appeared behind him. The aura was surging and extremely terrifying. Nietian was slightly stunned. Immediately, the sword Absolute Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. He smiled faintly without fear. The current sword Absolute Heaven Slash was much sharper than before, and the sword body was emitting blue light spots. 3 days ago, Nietian fused the profound stone heart that he obtained from the Bloody Massacre ancient tomb into the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. At this time, the sword Absolute Heaven Slash had already advanced from the original 3rd rank spirit weapon to the 5th rank spirit weapon. Based on Nietian's current strength, the 5th rank spirit weapon was just right for him. Not bad. You already have sword chi. Your talent in sword principle is not too bad. Nietian felt that there was sword chi surrounding the black sword and said faintly. Gu Qiulin was 17 years old now. Being able to condense sword chi could only be considered not bad, but definitely not a high talent in sword principle. Arrogant, Gu Qiulin shouted, and the black Qilin sword primordial spirit behind him slashed down. Suddenly, the walls on both sides were squeezed open and were about to collapse. Boom! The black sword slashed down, and sword chi enveloped it. Waves of chi surged out, and it actually had the power of a thunderbolt. Brat died. Gu Qiulin spared no effort in this slash. He actually wanted to take Nietian's life. Unfortunately, Nietian's life wasn't something that could be given so easily. Sky-piercing sword. Nietian suddenly raised his head, and his body immediately released vigorous yuan chi, which surged into the sky-piercing sword slash. It turned into sword chi and spread out, and the surrounding space seemed to have a slight change at this moment. Facing Gu Qiulin's all-out attack, Nietian did not dare to be careless. His 10th yuan meridian revolved wildly, and star energy continuously surged out, turning into star soul sword chi and enveloping the space within 100 meters. Previously, the reason why Nietian could kill Luo Fun was mostly because the latter was careless. Moreover, he had paid a huge price for using 3 star souls at the same time. Although Gu Qiulin only had the strength of a 9th layer giant spirit, his talent was still above Luo Fun's. Moreover, his Yuan spirit was a sword spirit, and its attack power was not inferior to Luo Fun's. With Nietian's current strength, without using star souls, the 9th level Chaos Beast, and the 3 seals of the Divine War God, he was on par with an expert like Chu Shifeng. It would be a little difficult for him to face Gu Qiulin head-on. Just as the sword chi was about to be unleashed, a star soul surged out from the star soul tablet, turning into a surging force that surged into the sky-piercing sword slash. Roar! In the next moment, a clear and intense dragon roar sounded out, and the shadow of a dragon soared into the sky, meeting the black Qilin sword's giant spirit true body. Bang! In the most intense collision, the shadow of the dragon raised its head and charged forward, knocking the black Qilin sword away. Gu Qiulin felt the Yuan meridian in his body tremble violently, and he let out a cry of pain as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was sent flying, and he almost lost his balance. Nietan, on the other hand, was as calm as a boulder in the middle of a storm. He didn't move a single inch. Nietan heaved a sigh of relief in his heart and rejoiced. Luckily, I used the blue dragon's Fury Star Soul. Otherwise, I would have lost in this collision. In the previous strike, Nietan not only used the strongest of the 3 intermediate moves of the AO sword art, Sky-Piercing Sword, but also a second-grade Star Soul, Blue Dragon's Fury. After all, Gu Qiulin's strength was at the 9th level of the Giant Spirit Realm, which was 8 levels higher than Nietan. If not for the Blue Dragon's Fury Star Soul, Nietan would have lost in this collision. This is impossible. Gu Qiulin spat out a mouthful of blood after being hit by Nietan's sword. After stabilizing his body, the shock in his heart was all revealed on his face, and he suddenly roared. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that his all-out attack would actually be defeated. Moreover, it was defeated so cleanly and thoroughly. At this moment, Gu Qiulin finally understood why Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng were so afraid of Nietan. Behind Nietan, Ao Kikimiluri and Ding Yifan were also stunned, and their expressions froze for a long time. From Nietan's previous strike, they could imagine the elegance when he killed Luo Fan that day. Ao Kikimiluri even felt that Nietan must have held back his strength. Otherwise, Gu Qiulin would have been a corpse under that strike. Indeed, Nietan had held back a little because he still had 2 second-grade Star Souls that he had not used. Chapter 328. You should cherish what's given to you, especially your face. These words were like a clear and resounding slap that struck on a Gu Qiulin's face, causing the latter's face to flush red while a ball of stuffy air was stuck in his chest, and he was unable to swallow it or spit it out. It was extremely uncomfortable. Gu Qiulin was the kind of person who didn't want face. Nietan was about to leave, but Gu Qiulin insisted on stopping him, which was a slap on his face. Gu Qiulin could only say that he deserved it. After Nietan finished his words, he ignored Gu Qiulin's reaction and turned to leave. Gu Qiulin was still stunned until Nietan and the others completely disappeared. He clenched his fists and his body was trembling. He stared at the direction where Nietan disappeared. Resentment, anger, humiliation, shock, and fear could be seen in his eyes. If looks could kill, Nietan would have long since been torn to shreds. Behind Gu Qiulin, Dongfang Du and Chu Shifeng were also a little confused. They stood there like stone statues, and it took them a long time to come to their senses. Lord Gu Nietan. At a moment, Dongfang Du came to his senses and wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Gu Qiulin. F***CK off. Gu Qiulin shouted in a deep voice, and his whole body emitted the most violent anger. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, Nietan, if I don't kill you, I'm not Gu Qiulin. Dongfang Du looked at Gu Qiulin, who was extremely angry. Not only was he not angry, but he also rolled his eyes, and a light smile flashed across his face. Although he failed to kill Duanmu Lu and his sister, Gu Qiulin and Nietan became sworn enemies, which was great news for Dongfang Du. After Nietan separated with Duanmu Lu and his sister, Aokiki Lily and Ding Yifan, they immediately returned to Tianluo City. After returning to the city governor's mansion, Nietan directly took Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner to the martial arts practice field in the mansion. Duanmu Lu, let's have a competition. Nietan looked a little excited and said to Duanmu Lu with a smile, Benefactor, this. Duanmu Lu was taken aback. With an awkward expression, he waved his hands and said, Benefactor has saved my brother and sister's lives many times. How can I fight with Benefactor? Nietan smiled speechlessly. This Duanmu Lu had a good character, but sometimes it was not good to be too restrained. Nietion didn't keep him in suspense. He smiled lightly and said directly, Duanmulu, I am very interested in the sword seal on your original spirit. Let's have a casual competition. Do me a favor and satisfy my curiosity. My savior, you know that there's a sword seal on my original spirit? Duanmulu was very surprised. Nietion nodded. He saw it when Duanmulu and Chu Shifeng were fighting. Although it was only for a short moment, Nietion could feel that the sword seal on Duanmulu's original spirit was very powerful. Nietion really didn't expect that Duanmulu, who looked a little slow, was a swordsman with the innate sword seal. Swordsmen with the innate sword seal were all geniuses in sword principle. The 5 peaks of sword principle in the heaven realm. Limitless Sword, Sainimo Qianjun. Western Sword Emperor, Jiu Qiansheng. Donchuan Sword Evil Duguanai. North Sea, Sword Master Gui Hen. And Danite Proud Sword Nietion. Among the 5 people, except for Nietion, the other 4 were born with sword spirit, and above the sword spirit, there was a powerful sword seal. Previously, Duanmulu didn't use his original spirit, so Nietion didn't know that he was a swordsman with the innate sword seal. If he knew this, he would definitely pay more attention. But it was not too late to know now. Okay. After thinking deeply for a long time, Duanmulu finally nodded, cupped his hands, and said sincerely, My savior, in that case, I will offend you. After Duanmulu finished speaking, the Baji Kunwu heavy sword appeared behind him. His temperament suddenly changed, and he looked extremely fierce, like a sharp sword out of its sheath. My savior, be careful. Duanmulu knew that his strength was far inferior to Nietion, so he wanted to seize the opportunity to attack first. He shouted loudly, and the Baji Kunwu let out a deep sword cry. The next moment, like a spirit snake, it attacked Nietion. The Baji Kunwu sword was black in color. It looked heavy and huge. But in Duanmulu's hands, it was agile and swift, and the sword chi surged, extremely fierce. Nietion smiled faintly, and the absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand. He raised his arm and slashed in the air, and the sword chi condensed into a sword shield. The next moment, the Baji Kunwu hit the sword shield, and a dazzling flame burst out. The two separated upon contact, and each took a few steps back. Not bad again. Nietion smiled faintly, and a vigorous origin energy suddenly surged out of his body. Then he stabbed with his sword, and a 10-meter sword light appeared, blasting towards Duanmulu. What a powerful sword chi! Duanmulu sensed the terrifying aura coming at him, and he couldn't help but frown. Immediately, the Baji Kunwu expanded dozens of times, and the giant spirit true body appeared. It was like a huge black shield that blocked in front of him. Bam! The sword light arrived in the blink of an eye, and the dazzling flame exploded. Duanmulu screamed and was sent flying. Brother! Duanmu Wainer saw Duanmulu being sent flying and couldn't help but exclaim, I'm fine. After Duanmulu landed, he stood steadily and wasn't injured. He naturally knew that Nietion had shown mercy, so he bowed and said, Thank you for showing mercy, benefactor. With Nietion's strength, he could even defeat Gu Qiulin with one move, let alone Duanmulu. Nietion looked at Duanmulu, smiled faintly, and asked, You've already condensed sword chi? Yes. Duanmulu nodded and said, I condensed sword chi 3 years ago, but the Baji Kunwu had the Baji sword seal on it, and I couldn't break the seal, so my sword Dao realm couldn't improve. There was a hint of helplessness in Duanmulu's words. Once upon a time, he was regarded as a genius in swordsmanship that only appeared once in hundreds of years in the Palace of Cosmos. Unfortunately, ever since he condensed the sword chi, the 8 Extremes Kunwu original spirit's 8 Extremes sword seal began to devour the sword chi in his body. Hence, until now, he still had not been able to develop the sword heart. Nietion was slightly surprised and asked, How old are you today? 15. I'll be 16 in 3 months. Duanmulu didn't hide and answered honestly. 15. Nietion took a deep breath and couldn't hide the joy at the corner of his mouth. Duanmu was 15 now, and he condensed sword chi 3 years ago, when he was only 12 years old. A sword-marked swordsman who condensed sword chi at the age of 12. This talent in sword Dao was absolutely amazing. Sword-marked swordsman, before the sword seal was unsealed, had a kind of suppression on the swordsman. The stronger the sword seal, the stronger the suppression. Nie Tian had come into contact with many sword-marked swordsmen in his previous life, and among the 5 great pinnacles of sword Dao in the Heaven Realm, he was good friends with Limitless Sword Saint Mo Qianjun and Western Region Sword Emperor Zhou Qiansheng. Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng were both innate sword-marked swordsmen. The former's boundless heavenly spirit innate great heavenly sword seal, while the latter's sunset ghost-marked swordsmen were innate ghost-marked swordsmen. However, Nie Tian felt that whether it was Mo Qianjun's great heavenly sword seal or Zhou Qiansheng's ghost-marked swordsmen, their auras were inferior to Duanmu Lu's Baji sword seal. Chapter 329. The stronger the sword seal was, the stronger the suppression on the swordsman before it was opened. The 8 Extreme Sword Seal was a sword seal that was stronger than the Great Heaven Sword Seal and the Ghost Mark Devil Seal. Duanmu Lu was actually able to condense sword chi at the age of 12 under the suppression of the 8 Extreme Sword Seal. Such sword Dao talent was simply incredible. The path of sword principle was more difficult than ordinary martial arts, so there were very few people in the world who focused on sword principle. Duanmu Lu's talent in sword principle was definitely the best among all the martial artists that Nie Tian had seen. Not to mention in the 3,000 small worlds, even in the God realm of the Heaven realm, Duanmu Lu's talent in sword principle could definitely be ranked in the top 10. What was more rare was that Duanmu Lu's mind was far more tenacious than ordinary martial artists. It was really not easy to condense sword chi at the age of 12 and then stagnate in sword principle realm for 3 years. He could still maintain a focused heart of sword principle. Involuntarily, Nie Tian looked at Duanmu Lu with a touch of approval. Duanmu Lu's talent in sword principle was good, his heart of sword principle was firm, and he had a good character. He was really a rare good boy. Benefactor, are you okay? Duanmu Lu suddenly found that Nie Tian looked at him in a strange way. It turned out to be a very eager expression. He couldn't help but frown, and sweat oozed out of his forehead. Duanmu Weiner also felt that something was wrong. She suddenly realized something and shouted, "Brother Nie Tian, don't tell me you like my brother?" Nie Tian was stunned, and then he was speechless. The brother and sister were usually a little silly, but they were really good at guessing people's minds. Nie Tian saw that Duanmu Lu was nervous with sweat on his forehead and quickly waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not interested in men." Duanmu Lu let out a long breath, with an expression of "that's good." He had even been thinking about how to reject Nie Tian just now. Nie Tian looked at Duanmu Lu's reaction and felt a chill in his heart. He did desire Duanmu Lu very much, but it was definitely not a longing for Duanmu Lu. He only felt that Duanmu Lu was a good seedling. If he could have a good teacher, his achievements in the way of the sword would definitely be earth-shattering. Nie Tian felt that he was a good teacher, so he had the thought of accepting a disciple. Nie Tian was confident that if Duanmu Lu was willing to become his disciple, he would definitely be able to guide the latter to the peak of the 5 great sword paths in the Heaven realm. Imagine returning to the Heaven world and finding out that one of his disciples could fight against Mo Qianjun, Zhou Qiansheng, and the others. That kind of feeling was definitely refreshing. However, Duanmu Lu was a little slow. He was not as quick-witted as Zhang Yifeng. He completely did not see through Nie Tian's intention. Nie Tian was not in a hurry. After learning that the siblings had run away without their unlucky father's knowledge, he said, "Duanmu Lu, you siblings can stay in the city Lord's mansion for now. I believe that it won't be long before Duanmu Bai comes looking for you." Duanmu Bai was the palace lord of Qingquan Palace. Now that he had lost his son and daughter, he must be very anxious. With Qingquan Palace's strength, it would not be difficult to find out the whereabouts of Duanmu Lu and his sister. Nie Tian had already thought about it. When Duanmu Bai came looking for him, he would definitely have a good talk with him. He had saved the lives of Duanmu Lu and his sister several times. Nie Tian would not let go of this kindness. After leaving the martial arts practice field, Nie Tian went to see Qiu Shan, the three Lei brothers, Gao Han, and the others. Their injuries were recovering well. Gao Han had basically recovered, and the three Lei brothers' Yuan spirits were also recovering. Only Qiu Shan had lost an arm. His strength was greatly reduced. However, Nie Tian could see that Qiu Shan's martial heart was not affected. Instead, it had become even more tenacious. He had once had his Yuan meridians destroyed for 25 years. If he could endure that kind of shock, a mere broken arm was nothing. Nie Tian promised Qiu Shan that he would find a suitable arm for him. At the very least, it must be at the Qilin arm or evil dragon arm level. Nie Yuro, Tang Yu, Qiu Ling, Jean DeBeo, and the others were also training hard. After the incident with Luo Fun, they also realized the importance of strength. Especially Jean DeBeo, who swore to Nie Tian that he would definitely become stronger and that he would definitely protect the people around him. Jean DeBeo's determination made Nie Tian happy. His strength was rising quickly, and it was very beneficial to the suppression of the 3,000 demon god seals in his body. At least for the time being, Nie Tian did not need to worry about the 3,000 demon god seals. At this time, Nie Tian came to Rui Qinyu's small courtyard. Old Li and Rui Qinyu were both in the courtyard. When they saw Nie Tian arrive, they stood up at the same time. Nie Tian, City Lord. Old Li greeted with a smile. After witnessing the battle between Nie Tian and Luo from a few days ago, he did not dare to underestimate Nie Tian anymore. Old Li, it has been hard on you. Nie Tian nodded and said, Heaven Luo City is surrounded by strong enemies. If not for Old Li holding the fort, I'm afraid some small fries would have broken into the City Lord's mansion. Nie Tian, City Lord, is too serious. Old Li smiled slightly. His attitude towards Nie Tian was extremely respectful. He said, Nie Tian, City Lord, save my family's young miss. It is an honor for this old man to be able to help Nie Tian, City Lord. Indeed, the current Heaven Luo City, under Nie Tian's power, had already become the target of public criticism. Dongfang Du, Chu Shifeng, Diao Zhengde, Gu Qiulin, as well as the hidden forces behind these people, were definitely watching Heaven Luo City at all times. That was especially true of Diao Zhengde. He would definitely want to cut Nie Tian into 1,000 pieces. Gu Qiulin's arrival also made Nie Tian realize that the commotion caused by the Dragon Blood Martial gathering was a little too big. Since the geniuses of the Su Mi spirit capital had come, then the forces of the other 3 domains might also send people. In this way, the Dragon Blood Martial gathering was no longer just a matter of the South Mountain region. It was about to become a big matter of the 3,000 small worlds. In order to hold the Dragon Blood Martial gathering 4 days later, Nie Tian had already informed Gu Yi and asked him to invite more Dan Wu Imperial Guards to hold the fort. Rui Qinyu, are you going to participate in the Dragon Blood Martial gathering? Nie Tian came to find Rui Qinyu to confirm if the latter was going to participate in the Dragon Blood Martial gathering. Of course, Rui Qinyu was as cold as ever, but the coldness in her eyes had faded a little. It was like a piece of ice that had not melted for 10,000 years had been touched at a certain moment, and was beginning to show signs of melting. Nie Tian nodded his head slightly. He had long known that with Rui Qinyu's personality, even if her body had not fully recovered, she would definitely participate in the Dragon Blood Martial gathering. Nie Tian took out a bottle of dragon blood and said, This dragon blood is enough for you to use for 10 days. After 10 days, I will send you more dragon blood. The blood-devouring power in Rui Qinyu's body could only be suppressed by dragon blood, and she needed 10 drops a day. Fortunately, the Dragon Bloodstone mine was about to be mined out, and Gu Yi was also very helpful. He had organized dozens of Stage 3 alchemists to refine dragon blood for Nie Tian, so Rui Qinyu was able to obtain an endless stream of dragon blood. Rui Qinyu did not stand on ceremony. She received the dragon blood and nodded lightly. Chapter 330. 3 days later, Heaven Luo Mountain. In the enormous Dragon Bloodstone mine, Hundreds of miners carried huge rocks weighing tens of thousands of kilograms on their shoulders. Although they were drenched in sweat, their faces were brimming with excitement and joy. This was the last batch of dragon bloodstones. Nietian had ordered that all miners, after finishing today's work, would receive an extra 10,000 low-grade origin crystals. These miners were mostly manifestation realm martial practitioners. They were all invited by the Yuan Chamber of Commerce. They had already been paid handsomely, and Nietian was just giving them another surprise. In any case, during this period of time, Nietian had already earned a fortune from the city entrance fees and martial gathering registration fees. A few hundred miners and a few million low-grade origin crystals were nothing to him. The main reason was that Nietian was very happy today. The excavation of the Dragon Bloodstone mine was completed faster than he had expected. This also meant that he could refine half of the dragon blood in his hands into pure dragon blood ahead of time. Half of the dragon bloodstones, after careful refinement by a third-rank alchemist, could be refined into over 600 drops of dragon blood. Rui Qinyu could rely on this dragon blood to ensure that she would not be tormented by the power of blood devouring for 2 months. As for the remaining half of the dragon bloodstones, it was directly transported to the Danwu City Alchemist Guild. That was an absolutely safe place, and no force would dare to trespass. Brother Nya, are you going to participate in the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering? Gu Yi stood beside Nietian. The latter's goatee curled up as he asked with a smile. Nietian naturally knew why the latter was happy. Because yesterday, Gu Yi had comprehended a trace of the true meaning of alchemy from the 9th rank pill recipe Nietian had given him. His mental power, which had been stagnant for a long time, had increased by another level, reaching the 63rd rank. It was very difficult to increase one's mental power. Not only was it closely related to talent, it was also sometimes dependent on luck. When one's mental power reached the later stages, every increase in rank was like climbing a stairway to heaven. Gu Yi's mental power had been stagnant at the 62nd rank for 2 years. Of course, he was happy to have a sudden breakthrough. He knew that Nietian urgently needed dragon bloodstones, and it seemed to be related to a girl called Rui Qinyu in the City Lord's mansion. Therefore, he guessed that Nietian would also participate in the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering. Yes, Nietian nodded. Glancing at Tong Fu beside Gu Yi, he said, I hope we won't meet Ah Fu. Tong Fu had just finished his closed-door training and was now a true element first-layer martial artist. Nietian estimated that with Tong Fu's current strength, coupled with his rank 8 legendary grade true spirit destruction hammer, even if he encountered a 2nd or even 3rd stage true essence stage martial artist, he would be able to easily defeat his opponent. Don't worry, Mr. Nya. If I meet you, I'll definitely show mercy. Tong Fu chuckled and said proudly. Gu Yi's expression sank as he knocked Tong Fu and said, Stinking brat, what nonsense are you spouting? What do you mean by mercy? You should just admit defeat. Tong Fu hesitated for a second, then helplessly said, Then just admit defeat. Nietian smiled faintly and did not say anything. Gu Yi glanced at Tong Fu and said in his heart, Smelly brat, Big Brother is doing this for your own good. Do you think you can beat Nietian just because you've advanced to the true element boundary? Dream on. Gu Yi had seen Nietian kill Luo Fan with his own eyes. Although he did not see how Nietian defeated Luo Fan, he had seen with his own eyes that Nietian had withstood the combined attack of 2 true element 5th layer martial artists. And there was also the red giant beast spirit that Nietian had revealed that day. That domineering and domineering aura of a king descending from the heavens. Now that he thought about it, his heart surged. Therefore, Gu Yi believed that even if Tong Fu and Nietian were to fight, he would definitely lose. At this time, Nietian noticed that Ding Yifan's expression was slightly awkward. He smiled and said, Young Master Ding, you will also be participating in the Dragon Blood Martial meet. Ding Yifan's face turned red as he replied, I'm just joining in the fun. Originally, Ding Yifan was full of confidence, thinking that he would be able to obtain a good ranking in the Dragon Blood Martial meet. But now that experts like Nie Tian and Tong Fu would be participating, and recently, many geniuses from the other three domains had appeared in Heaven Luo City and Danwu City. There were even people from Sumi's spirit capital appearing. His thoughts of obtaining a good ranking were basically strangled in the cradle. Right now, his mentality was still fine. Participating casually, he would just treat it as a way to verify his own strength. Ding Yifan suddenly recalled that just over a month ago, when Nie Tian had just arrived at Heaven Luo City, the two of them had met for the first time at Heaven Luo Mountain. That was right. Nie Tian only had the strength of a Wanxiang third layer, and Ding Yifan didn't even have the desire to look him in the eye. Now, in a short period of time, Nie Tian had already reached the first layer of Giant Spirit, and Ding Yifan was also at the first layer of Giant Spirit. But Nie Tian's battle prowess far surpassed this. Thinking back to the scene of Nie Tian defeating Gu Qiulin with a single sword strike 3 days ago, Ding Yifan still felt that it was inconceivable. Life was really interesting. That was then, and this was now. Now, it was Nie Tian's turn to not have the desire to look Ding Yifan in the eye. Nie Tian saw that Ding Yifan was somewhat dejected and said seriously, "The path of the martial path is to defy the heavens. Just like ascending the ladder to heaven. Some walk fast, some walk slow. But as long as the heart of the martial path is firm, you'll definitely be able to climb to the top of the ladder." These words had the meaning of teaching people. If it were said by other youths or martial artists of the same age, it would definitely arouse Ding Yifan's disgust. But coming from Nie Tian's mouth, Ding Yifan felt abnormally gratified, nodding his head heavily agitatedly. Nie Tian nodded lightly. On the path of the martial path, the heart of the martial path could not tolerate the slightest grain of sand. If the heart was not firm, how could one walk far? Gu Yi also nodded endlessly. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, "Old brother Nie, is Heaven Luo City still peaceful these few days? Jiaojingde, that old thing, didn't find trouble with you, right?" Nie Tian gave a faint smile and said, "There's no movement at the moment." Gu Yi had a strange look on his face as he frowned and said, "This isn't Jiaojingde's character. That old thing will definitely seek revenge for the smallest grievance. You killed his precious illegitimate child in front of everyone. He'll definitely take revenge crazily. Could it be that because he has too many illegitimate children, he's forgotten for a moment?" Gu Yi knew that Jiaozhengde was dissolute by nature, leaving seeds everywhere. In recent years, he had only slightly restrained himself. Luo Fen was merely one of his many illegitimate children. At this time, Nie Tian's brows suddenly tightened, and he immediately shouted, "Be careful!" Asterisk swish. Asterisk before his voice had faded. A sharp and cold sword chi whistled past, actually brushing past Nie Tian's face. Luckily, Nie Tian reacted in time. But even so, a trace of blood still appeared on his face. "Who's there?" Nie Tian roared angrily and turned around abruptly. He saw a black figure 100 meters away, standing there unmoving like a sharp sword. The black figure's austere eyes stared at Nie Tian from afar. A cold, killing intent actually spread out 100 meters away, enveloping Nie Tian. Sensing the other party's cold, killing intent, Nie Tian could not help but frown, feeling astonished in his heart. There are elixir martial forbidden guards lying in ambush within 1,000 meters. This person could actually approach within 100 meters of the Dragon Bloodstone vein without anyone noticing. Even before he made a move, I didn't sense his existence. This kind of concealment method is truly brilliant. At this moment, Nie Tian had already determined in his heart that the black figure before him was definitely an assassin. Chapter 331. Assassin. The person in front of him was definitely an assassin. This assassin not only had top-notch concealment methods, but his strength was also very strong. The killing intent all over his body was even more terrifying, almost able to be controlled freely, making people feel an extremely strong sense of oppression. If not for Nie Tian's tenacious nature, he would most likely lose his composure after being targeted by this person. 100 meters away, The black-clothed person's eyes twitched when he saw Niet Tian staring at him calmly, not avoiding his gaze in the slightest, seemingly somewhat angry. In the next instant, the black-clothed person's figure moved, disappearing in a flash. "Thief, where are you running?" Niet Tian had yet to move when Tong Fu already yelled and leaped, giving chase. "Fu!" Niet Tian and Gu yelled at the same time, but Tong Fu's figure was already 100 meters away. "Old Gu, young Lord Ding, you guys wait here. I'll go after Fu," Niet Tian said as he sprinted madly. That assassin clearly wanted to lure Niet Tian over, but Niet Tian had no intention of going over. But now that Tong Fu gave chase, he had no choice but to go over. For this assassin to be able to avoid so many elixir martial forbidden guards and directly appear within 100 meters of the Dragon Bloodstone vein, it was enough to show his strength. And the sword chi he shot out just now was extremely sharp. It was the most terrifying sword chi Niet Tian had seen since rebirth. If Niet Tian guessed correctly, this person's Sword Dao realm must have reached Sword Intent realm. Sword Chi was a level higher than Sword Heart realm, Sword Dao realm. Sword Chi contains Sword Heart. Sword Heart condensed Sword Intent. Sword Intent produced Sword Force. Sword Heart, Sword Intent, Sword Force. These three Sword Dao realms were closely related. Swordsmen who could reach Sword Intent realm were absolutely Sword Dao geniuses. Especially in these 3,000 small worlds, it was even more rare. Although Tong Fu's strength had already reached first-level true essence, with Niet Tian's deduction, he was absolutely not a match for the black-clothed assassin. Niet Tian was worried about Tong Fu's safety. The proud sword Heaven Wings appeared on his back. The wings flapped, and in the blink of an eye, he had already caught up to Tong Fu. The two stopped in a canyon, and the black-clothed person's aura completely vanished. Strange, that thief is gone. I clearly saw him enter this canyon. How did he disappear in the blink of an eye? Tong Fu looked around in confusion, but couldn't find the figure of the black-clothed man. Niet Tian frowned slightly, feeling extremely nervous. He spread out his spiritual sense and searched within 1,000 meters, but there was no aura. This person is a professional assassin. His concealment skills are very good. If he doesn't want to show himself, I won't be able to find him. Niet Tian thought to himself. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Fu, let's leave. On both sides of the canyon were cliffs and huge rocks. The black-clothed man could be hiding anywhere. Niet Tian had an ominous feeling in his heart. As he spoke, he cautiously retreated. That little thief got lucky. He's definitely here to snatch the Dragon Bloodstone. Tong Fu was carefree, completely unaware of the danger. Of course, Niet Tian knew that this man in black was definitely not here to snatch the Dragon Bloodstone. This person had concealed himself for a long time and directly attacked Niet Tian. Clearly, he wanted to kill Niet Tian with a single strike. Therefore, this assassin must have been ordered by someone to take Niet Tian's life. To be able to hire such a terrifying assassin, Niet Tian had already faintly guessed that the person behind this was most likely Diao Jingde. Swish! Swish! Just as Niet Tian and Tong Fu were cautiously retreating, a sharp whooshing sound echoed out as two streaks of sword chi shot towards them like two silver snakes. Niet Tian saw it clearly. Although the two sword chi didn't look imposing at first glance, their speed and aura were extremely terrifying. Even a true element realm martial artist's true element chi might not be able to withstand it. Sword 17. Niet Tian's reaction was extremely fast. With a twist of his palm, sword chi gushed out from his palm and formed a sword shield in front of him. At the same time, his body flashed with a green light. Extreme Wood Blue Sky Battle Armor was activated. Tong Fu also took out the Hammer of Destruction and held it horizontally in front of his chest as a shield. Bang! Bang! With two explosive sounds, the sword chi hit Niet Tian and Tong Fu at the same time. The two figures hurriedly retreated. Niet Tian's sword shield was broken, and even the Extreme Wood Blue Sky Battle Armor was cracked. Tong Fu had the Hammer of Destruction. The sword chi rebounded to the side of the cliff and sank into a 10-meter tall boulder. Bang! In the next moment, the boulder couldn't withstand the surging force of the sword chi and suddenly exploded, turning into rubble. Damn, this little bastard sword chi is so powerful. Tong Fu exclaimed, a look of panic on his face. Yet Tian steadied his body and slightly frowned. His brain was working at full speed. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth curled into a strange smile. Immediately, Heaven Rend appeared in his hand. With a stab, thousands of sword shadows suddenly appeared in the sky. The sword shadows formed a large net and spread out. So powerful, Tong Fu exclaimed, a look of pleasant surprise on his face. However, Nie Tian still looked nervous. As if suddenly sensing something, he raised the Heaven Rend in his hand and slashed down. Boom! Suddenly, the sword chi overflowed and the sword light shone brightly. 100-meter huge sword shadow appeared and pressed down majestically. The sudden burst of momentum made people's hearts palpitate. Tong Fu was surprised and confused because he couldn't see anyone in front of him, nor could he sense any aura. However, in the next moment, a strange scene appeared. Puff! A soft sound broke through the air. The huge sword net formed by the sword shadows seemed to be broken by something. Then, a vague outline appeared in the air. In the blink of an eye, it became clear and actually turned into the appearance of a man in black. This! Tong Fu was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand how the man in black appeared out of nowhere. The man in black rushed out of the sword net. A light shadow short sword appeared in his hand. With just a slash in the air, a visible layer of thin shield was formed around his body. Boom! The 100-meter huge sword shadow fell down like a mountain collapsing. The whole valley shook violently, and a terrifying ravine immediately appeared on the ground. Immediately, rubble and dust flew everywhere. After a long time, the rubble in the air gradually fell, but the man in black had already disappeared. Mr. Nya, that little thief was killed by your sword? Tong Fu couldn't find the figure of the man in black and asked in shock. However, Niet Tian frowned and shook his head, saying he escaped. Although rubble was flying and nothing could be seen clearly, Niet Tian sensed that the man in black's aura was tyrannical. It was obvious that he wasn't injured. Moreover, the thin shield around the man in black was formed by sword intent. Although it looked very weak, its defensive power was no weaker than the chi of a chi of a chi of a chi of a chi practitioner. Although Niet Tian's sword just now was powerful, it was impossible to break through the shield formed by sword intent. In the moment of danger, the man in black chose to use sword intent to defend instead of chi of chi. This undoubtedly meant that his strength was at the giant spirit realm, not the chi practitioner realm. What puzzled Niet Tian was that with his current rank 45 spiritual power, he actually couldn't sense the strength of the man in black. Mr. Nya, what happened just now? Why was that little thief able to appear out of thin air? Could it be that he's a ghost? Tong Fu still didn't know what happened just now, so he asked. Niet Tian said, he was invisible just now. Invisible? Tong Fu cried out strangely. How is that possible? Of course it's possible. Niet Tian smiled faintly and said, there are countless martial techniques in the world. Some martial techniques can allow a martial artist's body to fuse with space, achieving the effect of concealing one's figure and aura. There are even some martial artists whose innate primordial spirits have the ability to become invisible. Holy shit, then wouldn't a martial artist who can become invisible be able to approach anyone at will? Tong Fu cried out strangely and said. Niet Tian smiled and said, although invisible martial techniques are strange, they can't make a martial artist's body disappear. They just can't be detected by other martial artists. Every martial artist has a certain aura around them. If someone else enters your aura, you'll naturally be able to detect it, even if you can't see that person. Aura? Tong Fu had a suspicious look and said, why don't I have it? Of course you do. It's just that you don't know it. Niet Tian looked at Gu and smiled, but he couldn't help but be a little worried in his heart. This assassin has failed this time. He definitely won't let it go. Looks like I'll have to be extra careful from now on. Tian had just used the sword net to determine the position of the black-clothed man, and then smashed down with heaven-piercing sword. He originally thought that he would be able to heavily injure the black-clothed man, but he didn't expect that the latter would still escape. It was definitely not a good thing to be remembered by an assassin who could become invisible. Sword-intent swordsman, you're originally a good piece of unpolished jade. Why do you need to do such a dirty business as an assassin? Tian slightly shook his head, actually feeling pity for the assassin. Tian could feel that this assassin wasn't old. He should be around 20 years old. To be able to reach the realm of sword intent at this age, his talent in sword Dao was very good. He wasn't much weaker than Duanmu Lu. Duanmu Lu was 15 years old, and he had reached the realm of sword Qi, but this was under the situation where he was suppressed by the 8 extreme sword seal. If not for the 8 extreme sword seal, Duanmu Lu's sword Dao realm would at least be at the realm of sword heart, or even the realm of sword intent. Unfortunately, this black-clothed man had embarked on the path of no return as an assassin. On the path of sword Dao, if one wanted to go far, one must have a pure heart of sword Dao. The profession of assassin was bloody and dirty. Living in the darkness, it was destined that there wouldn't be a true expert in sword Dao. Whoosh! At this moment, an ear-piercing sound came from the sky, and something flew towards Tian. Tian frowned, and without thinking, he stretched out his hand to catch it. It was a bronze token. Tian, City Lord, we will meet again. Just as Tian was in shock, a faint voice came from the sky and gradually disappeared. The assassin just now actually didn't leave, and only left now. Tian looked at the black token in his hand. There was only a sickle engraved on it, and there was nothing else, which made him frown uncontrollably. After a moment, Gu Yi and Ding Yifan rushed over with a dozen Danwu Imperial Guards. Seeing that Tian and Tong Fu were fine, they heaved a sigh of relief. Old Gu, you came at the right time. Take a look. Do you recognize this token? Tian handed over the bronze token and asked. This is... When Gu Yi saw the bronze token, his gaze focused on the scythe, and his expression changed in a flash, actually revealing a terrified expression. He fiercely swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and even his voice started to tremble. The Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's Death Token. Chapter 332. Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. Hearing Gu Yi mention this name, Ding Yifan's forehead was covered in cold sweat. His mouth was wide open, and his face was filled with fear. Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's Death Token. Seeing Gu Yi and Ding Yifan's reaction, Tian couldn't help being slightly startled. He then smiled and said, Is this Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion very powerful? Looking at the two's reaction, it seemed that the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion was a very terrifying force. At least, it was the kind that made people tremble with fear. Gu Yi fiercely swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva and took a deep breath. Only then did he calm down and said with fear, Brother Nya, you might not know, but the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion is one of the most terrifying organizations in the 3,000 small worlds. It is the third dark force. Third dark force? Tian was slightly startled. His eyebrows raised. There was no fear, but rather curiosity as he said, Then what are the first and second dark forces? Gu Yi didn't react for a moment and explained with a serious expression, You have already seen the first dark force in the 3,000 small worlds. It is the Land of Blood Massacre. The second dark force is an unknown organization called the Heaven Burial Association. The third dark force is the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion, the #1 assassin organization in the 3,000 small worlds. Assassin organization. Tian muttered to himself and smiled. He said in his heart, That guy is indeed a professional assassin. It seems that he came from the top assassin organization. No wonder he is so strong. The black-clothed man just now wasn't strong, but his concealment methods and killing intent were definitely outstanding among the assassins. Compared to Tang Yuyu, he was much stronger. And yet Tian glanced at the bronze token and curled his lips. The #1 assassin organization in the 3,000 small worlds, the Death Token, is actually bronze. Isn't that too stingy? Could it be that their employer can't afford to kill? Gu, Yi, and Ding Yifan were speechless when they saw the serious expression on Ye Tian's face. This guy received the death token from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion and acted as if nothing had happened. He even had the mood to ridicule the other party's token. Ye Tian pursed his lips slightly. A trace of seriousness finally appeared on his face as he asked, "Elder Gu, what does this death god order represent?" Gu Yi licked his cracked lips and said, "The death god token is the symbol of the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. The people of the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion claim to be the representatives of the Grim Reaper. The people who received the Grim Reaper's writ were the people that the Grim Reaper had chosen. Once the Grim Reaper had set his eyes on him, he would undoubtedly die. As long as you don't die, the assassins of the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion will never stop." "Is that so?" Ye Tian stared at the horrified Gu Yi as the corners of his lips curled into a smile. He teased, "Then this is going to be troublesome. The people from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion will never be able to stop." And Gu Yi and Ding Yifan were both taken aback, unable to react for a moment. Ye Tian smiled confidently and said, "Because I will never die." His faint smile inadvertently exuded a strong self-confidence, containing incomparable domineering and firm determination. When Gu Yi and Ding Yifan saw Ye Tian's reaction, they were almost speechless. The Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion was the #1 assassin organization in the 3,000 small worlds and was ranked 3rd in the Dark Forces. Even the 4 great families did not have the ability to annihilate them. When Ye Tian received the Death God token from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion, he actually had a calm and indifferent reaction. If it was seen by others, they would definitely think that this youth was either crazy or stupid. But Gu Yi knew that Ye Tian did not place the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion in his eyes. So he said, "Brother Nye, the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion is a very terrifying force. There was once a red-clothed elder in the Alchemist Guild who died under the Death God token from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion." The Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion killed a red-clothed elder? Ye Tian was slightly stunned as he asked, "Your Alchemist Guild actually allows such a force to exist?" The Alchemist Guild was a colossus. There was once a sect in the southern mountain region that was comparable to a first-rate empire. Because a disciple of the sect killed a yellow-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild, the sect was annihilated overnight. The Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion killed a red-clothed elder. How could the Alchemist Guild allow such an enemy to continue existing? Gu Yi sighed as the muscles on his face twitched a few times, as if his heart was in pain, and said, "How could the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion be so easily eliminated?" That year, the Alchemist Guild sent out thousands of Dan Wu Imperial Guards, but in the end, they couldn't even find a location of the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. In the following years, although the Dan Wu Imperial Guard had always been searching for the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion, it was a pity that they didn't find anything and could only leave it be. Lord President forbids anyone to mention this matter because it is a stain on the Alchemist Guild. Speaking up to here, Gu Yi was abnormally angry because the red-clothed elder who died that year was his best friend. If that good friend didn't die, it wouldn't be Jiao Jingda's turn to become a red-clothed elder. Ye Tian nodded slightly and said, "A red-clothed elder was killed, and there was nothing we could do. It is indeed not a glorious thing." Gu Yi retracted his anger and looked at Ye Tian with a face full of black lines. He thought in his heart, "You really have a big heart. Even at this time, you still have the heart to ridicule the Alchemist Guild? I'm really drunk." Gu Yi still didn't take the bronze token from Ye Tian's hand. He didn't want to touch the Death God token. Instead, he pointed at the token and said, "It is rumored that the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's Death God token is divided into 7 grades. From low to high, they are black iron grade, bronze grade, silver grade, gold grade, purple gold grade, diamond grade, and black emperor grade. Every type of Death God token corresponds to a grade of assassin. The Death God token in your hand should be bronze grade, So the black-clothed man earlier should be a bronze great assassin from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. And when Yetion heard this, he couldn't help but frown slightly. He actually mocked himself. Looks like the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion doesn't take me seriously at all. They actually sent a bronze great assassin to fool me. Aren't they looking down on me too much? Gu Yi and Ding Yifan looked at each other. They already didn't know what to say. Yetion was too arrogant. He didn't put the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion in his eyes at all. Gu Yi frowned and continued to explain. Once the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's death god token is sent out, it will never be retracted until the person chosen by the death god dies. Then what if I kill the assassin they sent? Yetion interrupted. Gu Yi was startled and said, if a low-grade assassin fails the mission, it will be taken over by a high-grade assassin. If it fails again, the death god token will be upgraded again. In any case, as long as the person who received the death god token doesn't die, the assassination mission will never end. Yetion nodded. He kept the death god token and said with a serious face, this isn't bad. At least it gave me some time to breathe. I must get a Black Emperor Grade Death God token to play with some time. Black Emperor Grade? Gu Yi's eyes suddenly widened. That expression seemed to be saying, bro, don't mess around. The Black Emperor Grade was the highest grade of Death God token in the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. It was said that only the Pavilion Master had the qualifications to issue the Black Emperor Grade Death God token. And the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's Pavilion Master was rumored to be a heaven-defying expert. No one knew his true identity, and no one had seen his true appearance. It was just that many years ago, a person wearing the Death God's mask appeared in Sumi Ling capital. In one night, he killed many geniuses, shocking the entire 3,000 small worlds. In the end, the two great peaks of the 3,000 small worlds, the Tang family's patriarch Tang Hao and the Mo family's patriarch Mo Zhaojing joined hands and finally chased that person out of Sumi Ling capital. Since then, the 3,000 small worlds had an assassin organization that caused people to tremble with fear, the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. Many people thought that the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's Pavilion Master was the person who charged in a Sumi Ling capital. But no one could prove this. So the matter regarding the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion's Pavilion Master was almost a legend. In the 3,000 small worlds, there were probably only 3 people who had the qualifications to receive the Black Emperor Grade Death God token. The Tang family's patriarch Tang Hao, the Mo family's patriarch Mo Zhaojing, and the Alchemist Guild's president Meng Fanchen. At least for now, Yetion was still far from having the qualifications to receive the Black Emperor Grade Death God token. Actually, Yetion was just casually saying it. Although he sounded relaxed, he was thinking very clearly in his heart. A mere bronze rank assassin from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion was already so abnormal. If it was a Black Emperor Grade Pavilion Master, how terrifying would he be? Therefore, the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion was definitely a troublesome opponent. But Yetion was not afraid. Although the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion was terrifying, it was still a force of the 3,000 small worlds. Even if it was really stronger than the 4 great families, it was not that powerful. As long as Yetion was given some time, at most 5 years, at least 3 years, he would be able to stand at the peak of the 3,000 small worlds. Elder Gu, who do you think would invite the people from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion to kill me? At this time, Yetion suddenly thought of something. The corner of his mouth curled up strangely as he looked at Gu Yi with a smile that was not a smile. Gu Yi was stunned at first, then his mind went blank for a moment. Then it became clear. A familiar name blurted out, Diaojingda. Diaojingda. This name gave Gu Yi a fright. Ding Yifan was also a smart person. He immediately thought of something and said in surprise, Master Diao is the Alchemist Guild's red-clothed elder. How could he be related to the people from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion? The Alchemist Guild's Danwu Imperial Guard had been investigating for many years, and there was no news of the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion. How could Diaojingda find the people from the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion? Could it be? Gu Yi's heart turned cold. Bean-sized beads of sweat covered his forehead. His throat rolled, but he didn't dare to say the rest of his words. He only said in his heart, "Is there really any relationship between Jiao Jingde and the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion?" The Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion was a secretive organization. Very few people could find traces of this organization. If the assassin just now was really hired by Jiao Jingde to kill Nie Tian, then his identity was a little suspicious. Ding Yifan knew that Jiao Jingde's identity was special. He didn't dare to continue thinking about it. Nie Tian still had a calm expression. He said with a smile, "I don't care what Jiao Jingde's identity is. If he really wants to kill me, I don't mind peeling off his human skin." Gulp. Gu Yi and Ding Yifan gulped at the same time when they saw Nie Tian's unreasonable expression. "Mister." Just at this time, a familiar voice suddenly sounded. Qiu Shan's figure rushed over. "Qiu Shan." Seeing Qiu Shan's anxious look, Nie Tian's heart sank. Could it be that something happened again? Chapter 333. Qiu Shan looked at Nie Tian, unable to conceal the joy on his face, as if he had encountered a great thing. Important person? Nie Tian saw that Qiu Shan was a little happy and couldn't help but laugh. He joked, "How important?" Qiu Shan immediately realized that he had lost his composure. He laughed awkwardly and said, "Sir, it's the Palace Lord of Qinquan Palace, Duanmu Bai." Duanmu Bai. Gu Yi and Ding Yifan stared blankly at the same time. They immediately looked at each other and said in unison, "It's indeed an important person." Duanmu Bai, the Palace Lord of Qinquan Palace, had a very high status. Qinquan Palace in the southern mountain region was a top power that stood shoulder to shoulder with the God Transformation sect. Therefore, Duanmu Bai could be said to be a top figure in the southern mountain region, just like Tang Hao's status in the 3,000 small worlds. Nie Tian wasn't too surprised because he had already expected that Duanmu Bai would come. With the power of Qinquan Palace, it wasn't difficult to find out the whereabouts of Duanmu Lu and his sister. Duanmu Lu and his sister had sneaked out twice. He reckoned that Duanmu Bai's lungs were about to explode with anger, so he personally came looking for them. "Let's go and meet this important person." Nie Tian smiled faintly and prepared to immediately return to the city lord's mansion. In any case, the dragon bloodstone load was almost settled. It was enough to leave Gu Yi and Ding Yifan. A moment later, Nie Tian and Qiu Shan returned to the city lord's mansion of Tianluo City. In the main hall of the city lord's mansion, a white-clothed middle-aged man sat at the head of the guest seat. Next to him stood Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner. Both of them were trembling with fear. They lowered their heads and didn't even dare to breathe loudly like wilted eggplants. The middle-aged man looked to be about 30 years old. He was dressed in green and had an imposing appearance. Although he was sitting, one could see that he was tall and handsome. Moreover, his eyebrows were full of heroic spirit. Although he didn't speak, he already exuded a dignified aura. He was none other than the palace master of Qinquan Palace, Duanmu Bai. Jean de Bao was sitting on the other side, facing Duanmu Bai. He was afraid that Duanmu Bai would be anxious from waiting, so he said, "Mr. Duanmu, please have some tea. It's the best Nanshan red maple leaf, freshly picked and especially fresh." Duanmu Bai only glanced at Jean de Bao. He didn't say anything, nor did he drink his tea. Jean de Bao smiled awkwardly and said in his heart, "Big shots are really hard to serve. I'd better obediently wait for boss to come back." "Sir, the Palace Lord of Duanmu is already waiting for you." At this time, Qiu Shan's voice sounded. "Phew." Seeing that Nie Tian and Qiu Shan had returned, Jean de Bao secretly let out a breath of foul air. Interacting with these big shots was really a bit stifling. Jean de Bao could not take it anymore. "Brother Nie Tian, you're back." When Duanmu Weiner saw Nie Tian appear, she was a little excited, as if she had met her savior, and shouted in surprise. "Don't talk," Duanmu Bai said in a cold voice. He glared fiercely at Duanmu Weiner, then looked out of the hall and saw a 16 or 17-year-old youth walking over. He immediately frowned, but still stood up. No matter what, Nie Tian was the savior of Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner, and he had saved the two of them more than once. In this regard, Duanmu Bai had to show kindness to Nyetian. Moreover, recently, Nyetian's name had become extremely famous, and the entire Nanshan region was talking about him like crazy, especially after Nyetian tortured and killed Luo Fun. Duanmu Bai also wanted to see what kind of youth could stir up such a storm in the Nanshan region. Sir, this is the palace master of Duanmu. Qiu Shan followed behind Nietan, unable to hide the excitement in his heart as he introduced. The reason why Qiu Shan cared so much about the appearance of Duanmu Bai was because he saw hope for revenge. If he could borrow the power of Duanmu Bai, perhaps his revenge could be avenged a day earlier. Nietian nodded, smiled faintly, and said, Palace Master of Duanmu, an important person. Duanmu Bai looked at Nietian's relaxed expression and seemed to be a little unhappy. He said, Nietian City Lord's Dragon Blood Martial Meat has alarmed the entire Nanshan region, and even the other 3 regions and the Sumeru spirit know about it. You are the important person. Palace Master of Duanmu praises me too much. Nietian did not stand on ceremony, and accepted Duanmu Bai's praise, then extended his hand and said, Please sit. Duanmu Bai sat down, but his face was clearly unhappy. In his opinion, with his status, visiting the city lord's mansion of a small city at the border of a third-rate empire, the city lord should be extremely excited and rush to praise him to the heavens. But Nietian's reaction was too calm. This made Duanmu Bai a little uncomfortable and slightly unhappy. Father, this is the Nietian city lord I told you about, the great benefactor of me and one who has saved me and won 3 times. Duanmu Lu sensed that Duanmu Bai was a little unhappy and hurriedly said, Duanmu Bai nodded and slightly cupped his hands, saying, Many thanks to Nietian City Lord for saving my son's life several times. Duanmu Bai is extremely grateful. No need to be grateful. Nietian smiled faintly, took a sip of the fine Nanshan maple leaf, and said with a smile, I am a more pragmatic person. Palace Master of Duanmu Bai should directly exchange your gratitude for benefits that can be seen. As soon as Nietian said this, Duanmu Bai directly spat out the mouthful of tea that he had just drunk. He did not expect that Nietian would actually take it seriously, and even say it so bluntly. Even if you want benefits, you should use a hint, right? How can you open your mouth to ask for benefits so directly? This was simply too shameless. Not only Duanmu Bai, but also Duanmu Lu, Duanmu Weiner, Qiu Shan, and Jean de Bayo, who were standing behind him, looked at Nietian in surprise, as if they were wondering whether they had heard it wrong. Boss, although you saved Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner, how can you ask for benefits directly like this? Will he give you anything? The fat on Jean de Bayo's fat face twisted together, and he complained in his heart. Qiu Shan also frowned, thinking that Nietian was a little too much. However, Nietian smiled lightly, slowly put down the teacup in his hand, and said with a smile, Why are you looking at me like this? Palace Master of Duanmu Bai expressed his gratitude to me, and I can't refuse, can I? That would be too disrespectful to Palace Master of Duanmu Bai. Palace Master of Duanmu Bai, am I right? Yes, sir. Duanmu Bai looked at Nietian's cheeky smile, and his facial muscles twitched a few times in embarrassment. In the end, he could only nod. He had already said what he wanted to say, and Nietian didn't let go. Duanmu had no choice but to accept it. He really didn't expect the famous Tian Luo City Lord to be such a greedy guy. He was so eager to get benefits. It was really unacceptable. But when he thought of the entrance fee of low-grade yuan crystals he had to pay when entering the city, Duanmu Bai understood in his heart that Nietian was a person who put profit above all else. Duanmu Bai looked at Nietian and said in his heart, Nietian, you are still too young and have no foresight. You saved my son and daughter. This is a great favor, yet you want to ask for benefits from me. Fine, as long as your conditions are not too excessive, I will agree. Even if I am blackmailed by you once, it can only happen once. Originally, Duanmu Bai thought that the Tian Luo City Lord was a young talent, and even wanted to make friends with him. But Nietian's current performance had really disappointed him. Duanmu Bai knew that the Tian Luo City Lord seemed to be boundless on the surface, but in reality, there were turbulent undercurrents. So many powerful forces had gathered in Tianluo City, and yet Tian City Lord had offended many people. He had even offended the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild. Under such circumstances, how long could Tianluo City's glory last? If Nye Tian was a person who could balance the various forces, then there might be a chance to protect Tianluo City. But the Nye Tian he saw now was a person who put profit above all else. Now that Nye Tian had Gu Yi in the Yuan Chamber of Commerce supporting him, Tianluo City would naturally be fine. But after the Dragon Blood Marshal meet, would Gu Yi in the Yuan Chamber of Commerce continue to protect Tianluo City? Probably not. Therefore, Duanmu Bai believed that after the Dragon Blood Marshal meet, Tianluo City's glory would come to an end. At that time, any random force could raise Tianluo City to ruins. Nye Tian saw Duanmu Bai's expression change again and roughly guessed what the latter was thinking. But he did not care and drank a big mouthful of tea, then bluntly said, "I want to form an alliance with Chinquin Palace." Pooh! 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 Bang! Before Nidan finished speaking, Duanmu Bai spat out 3 mouthfuls of tea. Then his hand trembled, and the teacup fell to the ground. The others, on the other hand, widened their eyes and looked at Nye Tian with stiff expressions. Alliance? To think that Nye Tian could say it. What kind of force was Chinquin Palace? What kind of force was Tianluo City? One was the top force of Nanshan region. The other was a small city at the border of a third-rate empire. When these two forces were put together, it was like the difference between an elephant and an ant, the difference between top-grade yuan crystals and pebbles. Not to mention an alliance. Even if Tianluo City attached itself to Chinquin Palace, it was absolutely impossible. Tianluo City, or more accurately, Nye Tian, had made too many enemies. If they formed an alliance with Tianluo City at this time, wouldn't they be inviting trouble to themselves? No matter how stupid Duanmu Bai was, he would not be so stupid. Although Nye Tian had saved Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner, Nye Tian's benefits were too great, and he could not agree. Nye Tian did not know what Duanmu Bai was thinking, but he knew that forming an alliance with Chinquin Palace was definitely giving the latter a chance to become the top force in the 3,000 small worlds. If Chinquin Palace formed an alliance with Nye Tian within a few years, they would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the 4 great families and even have the opportunity to enter a higher level of the world. Nye Tian wanted to form an alliance with Chinquin Palace after careful consideration. Now, he had offended too many people. The God Transformation sect, Diao Zhengde, the young master of the Gu family, and the hidden Doomsday Flame. Just now, there was the more troublesome Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion. Although he had Gu Yi and the Yuan Chamber of Commerce by his side, they were not really powerful. Although Gu Yi was a red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild, he relied on the strength of the Alchemist Guild, and there were not many experts he could really mobilize. Although the Yuan Chamber of Commerce was one of the 7 top chambers of commerce, it was still a chamber of commerce, and, compared to a real sect, it was much weaker. Chapter 334. In the Nanshan region, there was a popular saying, "South is Huashan, north is Chinquin." The Huashan sect and Chinquin Palace were the 2 most powerful forces in the Nanshan region. With Chinquin Palace in charge of Tianluo City, other forces would have to think twice before making a move against Tianluo City. At least in the Nanshan region, apart from the Huashan sect, there was no other force that dared to provoke the Chinquin Palace. Nye Tian's plan was not bad. As for whether Duanmu Bai would do as he wanted, it was unknown. Seeing Duanmu Bai spit out 3 mouthfuls of tea and even the teacup fell to the ground, Nye Tian chuckled and said, "Don't be so excited, Palace Lord Duanmu Bai. Tianluo City is not a big force, and I'm not a big shot, so there is no need to be so excited." As Nye Tian spoke, he took small sips of tea while observing Duanmu Bai's reaction. Jean de Bayo couldn't stand it anymore. He rolled his eyes and thought to himself, "Boss, why is Duanmu Bai so excited? He's obviously spitting out tea because of you." Duanmu Lu's face was also unsightly. Why was his benefactor, who had always been wise and mighty in his heart, behaving so stupidly today? Duan Bai stared at Nietian for a long time with a pair of fox-like eyes, but the latter kept smiling. He really couldn't understand why Great Master Gu Yi and the Diyuan Chamber of Commerce would cooperate with such a guy in front of him. Nietian City Lord, I cannot agree to the alliance. Duan Bai suppressed the anger in his heart and refused cold. The benefits that Nietian wanted were too great. If Duan Bai agreed, it would be the same as pushing Qinquan Palace into the fire. Nietian had already expected Duan Bai's answer, so he wasn't angry. He just smiled and said, "That is a bit of a pity." Duan Bai was in a bad mood because he learned about Chu Shifeng from Duan Lu. He didn't want to stay in Tianluo City any longer and said, "Nietian City Lord, the alliance is impossible. Give me something else." Duan Bai was very clear about gratitude and hatred. No matter how unreasonable Nietian was, he was still the benefactor of Duan Lu and his sister, especially Duan Lu, who kept calling him benefactor as if this benefactor status was about to surpass his father's. Duan Bai wanted to directly give Nietian some benefits, and that would be enough to repay him. Nietian Bai looked at the anxious Duan Bai and smiled. He didn't want to continue messing around with the latter. He put away his playful face and suddenly became serious. Suddenly, a surge of confidence appeared. He said seriously, "Palace Lord Duan Bai, I know it is hard for you to accept the alliance, but I will give you a satisfactory compensation." Duan Bai was stunned. He suddenly felt that Nietian seemed to have changed into a different person. A trace of astonishment flashed in his eyes. He immediately smiled and asked, "What compensation can Nietian City Lord give me?" This time, Duan Bai didn't dare to touch the teacup again. He was afraid that Nietian would make another mistake and break another teacup. The corner of Nietian Bai's mouth curled up, and a trace of confidence filled his face. He looked at Duan Bai and said, "Activate the Baji sword seal for Duan Lu." "What did you say?" As soon as Nietian Bai finished speaking, Duan Bai stood up. Then, an uncontrollable anger appeared on his face. He roared, "Nietian City Lord, even if you were my son's savior, you can't joke around with his Baji sword seal." "Oh!" Nietian Bai was slightly stunned. He immediately stood up, and his eyes shot out a domineering and confident look. He said, "Palace Lord Duan Bai, do I look like I'm joking?" Duan Bai's expression stiffened as he stared at Nietian like a hawk. But Nietian didn't dodge, and his entire body emanated a strand of confidence and fierceness, causing him to seem like an unsheathed sword that revealed its edge. Feeling the domineering confidence from Nietian Bai, Duan Bai's heart trembled. He said in surprise, "Why do I feel inexplicably shocked? He is only in the first layer of the giant spirit realm, but his eyes are fearless. He doesn't fear my deterrence at all. The strength of this child's heart is truly terrifying." At this moment, Nietian reminded Duan Bai of a phrase, "A hidden dragon. The hidden dragon rises from the abyss, and its power breaks through the heavens." However, Duan Lu's 8 extreme sword seal was no small matter. Duan Bai had searched all the sealers and sword Dao grandmasters in the 3,000 small worlds. Even the Lin family's patriarch, Lin Yiqing, couldn't see what the 8 extreme sword seal was. It was impossible for him to believe that a 16-year-old youth like Nietian could activate the 8 extreme sword seal. Behind Duan Bai, Duan Lu was petrified. He looked at Nietian Bai blankly, and his eyes revealed an unconcealable desire. Activating the 8 extreme sword seal was too important to him. If the 8 extreme sword seal on the 8 extreme Kunwu sword couldn't be activated, no matter how hard he worked in his life, his achievements would ultimately be limited. No one knew how much suppression the 8 extreme sword seal had on him. Only Duan Lu knew. Duan Lu was confident that if not for the existence of the 8 extreme sword seal, his current strength would at least be at the peak of the giant spirit realm, or even the true essence realm. As for his sword Dao realm, it would at least be at the sword intent realm. Think about it, a 15-year-old true essence, first-level martial artist, coupled with the sword intent realm. Once such a character appeared out of nowhere, Even the three monstrous geniuses of Sumi Spirit City would be left in the dust and would be overshadowed. Unfortunately, Duanmu Lu was suppressed too much by the 8 extreme sword seal, so he only had the strength of a second-level giant spirit realm, Sword Chi realm. When Duanmu Bai saw the look in Duanmu Lu's eyes, his heart was suddenly touched, and he immediately felt a sense of frustration as a father. The surrounding Jean de Bayo, Qiu Shan, and the others were stunned. They didn't know what the 8 extreme sword seal Nye Tian was talking about was, but seeing the reaction of the Duanmu father and son, it seemed to be something very important to them. Nye Tian City Lord, how can I believe that you can do it? Although he didn't believe it in his heart, Duanmu Bai didn't want to give up this hope, even if it seemed so small that it was nil. So he calmed himself down and asked in a deep voice. Nye Tian faintly smiled and said, Palace Lord Duanmu, I want to confirm first, if I help Duanmu Lu open the 8 extreme sword seal, will you agree to the alliance? This time, Nye Tian showed his strong side, which was beyond confidence. Now, whether he could obtain the support of Qinquan Palace was very important to him. Duanmu Bai's brows furrowed as a wrinkle appeared on his forehead. Forming an alliance, this matter was a big deal for Qinquan Palace, and it was a big deal related to their future, so they had to think about it carefully. Especially in this kind of situation, Heaven Luo City was already at the cusp of the storm. Forming an alliance with Nye Tian was equivalent to pushing Qinquan Palace to the fire rack to roast. But Duanmu Lu was really important to Duanmu Bai. If Duanmu Lu couldn't open the 8 extreme sword seal, his achievements in this life were destined to not be too high, and he wouldn't be able to shoulder the burden of Qinquan Palace. So the final possibility was that Qinquan Palace would be taken over by other tyrannical disciples. Unfortunately, the younger generation of Qinquan Palace had withered, and the only one, Chu Shifeng, had betrayed them. Duanmu Bai had indeed considered making Chu Shifeng the next master of Qinquan Palace, but now it was completely impossible. At this moment, whether Duanmu Lu could rise or not was more important. If Qinquan Palace couldn't have a powerful palace master in the future, then it was very likely that Duanmu Bai would decline after 100 years. But if Duanmu Lu's sword seal was opened, then he would definitely become a figure standing at the top of the 3,000 small worlds. With him, at least Qinquan Palace could be protected for hundreds of years. Forming an alliance with Nye Tian was tantamount to helping him resist the pressure of various forces, and it was also a big challenge for Qinquan Palace. Nye Tian saw that Duanmu Bai was hesitating and had already guessed what he was thinking. He said, Palace Master Duanmu, do you want to see Qinquan Palace decline, or do you want to form an alliance with me and gamble for a good future for Qinquan Palace? You have to think carefully about what to do and what to choose. Hearing Nye Tian's words, Duanmu Bai was suddenly stunned, and the shock in his heart was written all over his face. Duanmu Bai thought for a long time about forming an alliance with Tian Luo City. But Nye Tian could point out the essence of the whole thing with just one sentence. Just this kind of keen insight and analysis of the overall situation was very good. Duanmu by now knew that he had completely misjudged Nye Tian just now. Or it could be said that Nye Tian deliberately made him misjudge and shocked him with a kind of difference. Thinking of this, Duanmu Bai felt the hair on his neck stand up and all the pores on his body opened up. Nye Tian's scheming was so deep that it made people tremble. Good. Suddenly, Duanmu Bai shouted in a deep voice, and then immediately laughed and said in a clear voice, Nye Tian City Lord, if you can really open my son's 8 extreme sword seal, this palace master is willing to form an alliance with Tian Luo City. Duanmu's gamble was in vain. Forming an alliance with Tian Luo City was a huge challenge. But as long as this challenge was accepted, Qinquan Palace would have a powerful palace master in the future. This gamble was not a loss, but Duanmu Bai still doubted whether Nye Tian could really open the 8 extreme sword seal. That was the 8 extremes sword seal, and even the master of the Lin family, Lin Yiqing, was helpless against it. Very good. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said in his heart, Duanmu Bai, you could be considered a smart person, and you made the right choice at the crucial moment. Nyetian, City Lord. Duan Mu Bai looked at Nyetian, and just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by the latter. Nyetian looked at Duan Mu Bai and said directly, I know you doubt whether I can open the 8 Extreme Sword Seal, but you won't doubt me soon because I will open the 8 Extreme Sword Seal for Duan Mu Lu right now. Right now. Duan Mu Bai and Duan Mu Lu were stunned at the same time and exclaimed at the same time, looking at Nyetian in surprise. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, But before I open the sword seal, I have 2 conditions. Nyetian, City Lord, please say it. Duan Mu Bai was a little excited, and this time, his face revealed a really excited expression. Nyetian smiled faintly, looked at Duan Mu Lu, and said, I want to accept you as my disciple. Accepting Duan Mu Lu as a disciple, this idea had already been in Nyetian's mind for a long time, but it was a pity that the former didn't understand, so Nyetian just said it directly. Accept disciple? Duan Mu Bai was stunned for a moment, and his shocked gaze was clearly saying, With your strength, are you qualified to accept a disciple? Chapter 335. Duan Mu Bai looked at Nyetian speechlessly. He even suspected that he had heard wrongly. Nyetian wanted to take Duan Mu Lu as his disciple. This sounded a little ridiculous. Duan Mu Lu was at the 2nd level of the Giant Spirit Realm, while Nyetian was at the 1st level of the Giant Spirit Realm. How could a teacher be weaker than a student? Even though Duan Mu Bai had heard about Nyetian torturing and killing Luo Fun, he felt that it was a little exaggerated. Even if he could see that Nyetian was a hidden dragon, he didn't think that the latter was qualified to be Duan Mu Bai's teacher. One must know that once Nyetian became Duan Mu Bai's teacher, he would be on equal footing with Duan Mu Bai, his father. What was a teacher? It was a master. Master, both a teacher and a father. Duan Mu Bai understood this point, and Nyetian of course understood this point as well. This was also one of the reasons why he wanted to take Duan Mu Lu as his disciple. With the identity of Duan Mu Lu's teacher, he could be on equal footing with Duan Mu Bai without any scruples. Benefactor, I am willing to take you as my teacher. Just when Duan Mu Bai was still highly suspicious of Nyetian, Duan Mu Lu, who was behind him, seemed to have suddenly understood something. He cried out in surprise and immediately knelt down. Duan Mu Bai's eyes widened as he looked at Duan Mu Lu with a dumbfounded expression. His expression was extremely amusing. Duan Mu Lu had already knelt down. If he didn't take Nyetian as his teacher, he would have knelt for nothing. And at this time, if Duan Mu Bai objected, it would definitely not be a wise choice. This was because Nyetian had yet to activate the Baji Sword Seal for Duan Mu Lu. Nyetian looked at Duan Mu Lu and said happily in his heart, Brat, you're finally enlightened. I didn't save you 3 times in vain. Palace Lord Duan Mu, you won't object, will you? Nyetian glanced at Duan Mu Bai and said with some pride. Duan Mu Bai wiped the sweat off his forehead and shook his head. Of course I don't object. At this point, Duan Mu Bai had no other choice. He couldn't figure out how things had escalated to this point. Jean de Bayo and Xiao Shan smiled at each other behind Nyetian. They really admired Nyetian's brilliance. Next, Duan Mu Bai respectfully bowed to acknowledge Nyetian as his teacher. Nyetian sat upright and helped him up in the end. He said with a smile, Very good. From now on, you are my 10th, 11th direct disciple. Duan Mu Lu was taken aback. He said in surprise, Teacher, do I still have senior brothers? Duan Mu Bai curled his lips and said in his heart, Are you sure you're not joking? Nyetian said seriously, You still have 10 senior brothers above you. One of them is in the City Lord's mansion and is currently in seclusion. As for the other 9, I'll introduce them to you in the future. As Nyetian said that, he glanced at Duan Mu Bai and said in his heart, You're really lucky. The reason why Nyetian said that was because of Tang Hao. Duan Mu Lu had become Nyetian's direct disciple. That meant that he had directly become Tang Hao's junior brother. Duan Mu Bai was 1 level higher than Tang Hao for no reason. If that wasn't luck, then what was? If Duan Mu Bai knew this, he would probably be so happy that his chrysanthemum would bloom. Nyetian, City Lord, the first condition has been fulfilled. Tell me your condition for the 2nd day. Duan Mu Bai was a little anxious. He wanted Nyetian to open the Baji sword seal for Duanmu Lu as soon as possible. Nyetian was not in a hurry. Instead, he took out a scroll of martial arts and said, Duanmu Lu, this scroll of heaven-class sword technique, ultimate sword technique of 9 extremes. Consider it the first gift from Master to you. Heaven-class sword technique. Duanmu Bai and Duanmu Lu were stunned at the same time. Duanmu Bai's divine sense probed over, and he was immediately petrified. The moment Duanmu Lu's hands touched the sword technique, he was also stunned on the spot. After the father and son were still for a few seconds, they finally reacted. Nyetian City Lord, your move is really. Duanmu Bai's expression was excited. Even his voice trembled. His reaction was poles apart from before. At the end of his sentence, he actually didn't know how to describe it. He stammered and couldn't continue. Nyetian smiled indifferently and teased, I'm really too generous. You're ashamed, aren't you? Duanmu Bai's old face blushed. He smiled awkwardly and said, I'm ashamed. Jean de Bayo and Qiu Shan stared blankly. Of course, it wasn't because Nyetian took out the heaven-class sword technique, but because Duanmu Bai called himself I. It seemed that the heaven-class sword technique was still powerful. Once it was taken out, even Duanmu Bai took the initiative to lower his head. The ultimate sword technique of 9 extremes in Nyetian's hands was also taken out from the Blood Massacre Hall. Moreover, it was a heaven-class, high-class sword technique. Nyetian carefully studied it. The difficulty of practicing it was very high. It had very high requirements for the swordsman's talent and perseverance. It was not something that an ordinary swordsman could successfully practice. Nyetian felt that the ultimate sword technique of 9 extremes was very suitable for Duanmu Lu. Although Duanmu Lu was a little slow sometimes, his talent and swordsmanship was not just for show. Moreover, he had a firm mind. He would definitely be able to successfully practice the ultimate sword technique of 9 extremes. Thank you, teacher. Duanmu Lu almost trembled as he took the sword technique. The pride in his heart was all revealed on his face. Nyetian nodded his head. He immediately looked at Duanmu Bai again and said, Palace Lord Duanmu, the first condition has been fulfilled. I still have a second condition. Nyetian City Lord, please speak. Duanmu Bai was more proactive this time. His face was full of happiness. Duanmu Lu directly obtained a heaven-class, high-class sword technique. As his father, how could he not be happy? Nyetian nodded slightly. His expression became more serious. He said seriously, I would like to borrow your sex universe stone. Universe stone. Hearing these 3 words, Duanmu Bai's smiling face stiffened. The universe stone was the most valuable treasure of the Qingquan Palace. It was a huge stone that was 100 meters tall and dozens of meters wide. It was rumored that the universe stone was a divine stone passed down from the immemorial era. It could resist elemental energy attacks. It could only withstand attacks of pure strength. Moreover, it could recover. In other words, if a martial artist hit the universe stone with his palm and made a palm print, the palm print would recover in the blink of an eye. It was very magical. The universe stone was regarded as the most valuable treasure of the Qingquan Palace. From a certain point of view, it was the symbol of the Qingquan Palace. Nyetian and the Qingquan Palace had formed an alliance. Of course, he had to understand the latter first. Therefore, not only did he know of the existence of a universe stone, he even knew that the true crystal that he had obtained from Duanmu Lu and Duanmu Weiner was produced from the universe stone. If Nyetian's guess was right, the universe stone was actually a true jellyfish stone. The true jellyfish stone was a very special ore. It was extremely flexible and had close to 100% resistance to elemental energy attacks. Furthermore, it could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It produced the forbidden stone of illusionists, the true crystal. If the true jellyfish stone was used to create a spirit weapon or a set of armor, it would definitely have an unimaginable magical effect. But Nyetian did not borrow the universe stone from Duanmu Bai to create a spirit weapon. He had other uses. He wanted to use the universe stone as the selection stone for the dragon blood martial meat. To put it bluntly, He wanted to use the Universe Stone to test the strength of all the martial artists participating in the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. Because there were too many people who signed up for the Dragon Blood Martial Meet, close to 100,000 people. If all of them were to compete in the arena, there would probably not be a result even next year. Of course, using a divine object like the Universe Stone to select the participants of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet was too much of a waste. Yet Tion's use of the Universe Stone had a deeper meaning. The Universe Stone was almost as famous as the Chinquin Palace. He wanted to use the Universe Stone to tell the entire Nanshan region that Tian Luo City and the Chinquin Palace had formed an alliance. If the Universe Stone appeared at the Dragon Blood Martial Meet, it would be equivalent to telling everyone that Tian Luo City had a powerful ally, the Chinquin Palace. This way, it would have the effect of intimidating everyone, and it would also tie Tian Luo City and the Chinquin Palace firmly together. It was just that the Universe Stone was the treasure of the Chinquin Palace. Whether or not Duanmu Bai was willing to lend it was still a question. Duanmu Bai stared at Nye Tian for a long time. After making sure that Nye Tian wasn't joking, he said in a deep voice, "City Lord Nye Tian, the Heaven and Earth Stone is the most precious treasure of the Heaven and Earth Palace. Although I'm the master of the Heaven and Earth Palace, I can't." But just as Duanmu Bai was halfway through his sentence, he was forcefully interrupted by Nye Tian. "Palace Lord Duanmu, if you're not willing to lend the Universe Stone, then you can leave." Nye Tian's expression was cold, his eyes resolute. Duanmu Bai froze, and immediately reacted as if he was at a loss of what to do. He did not expect that Nye Tian, this guy, would change his attitude faster than flipping a book. Just a moment ago, the atmosphere was harmonious, and then before he could finish his sentence, dark clouds rolled. Jean de Bayo, Qiu Shan, Duanmu Lu, and Duanmu Weiner all looked at Nye Tian. Some were embarrassed, some were confused. Duanmu Bai's face turned green and red. Duanmu Lu looked at him from the side, his eyes clearly urging him to agree to Nye Tian's conditions. Nye Tian, City Lord. After a long time, Duanmu Bai finally opened his mouth again and said, "Do you really want to borrow the Universe Stone?" "Yes." Nye Tian nodded his head, very resolute. "Okay." Duanmu Bai made up his mind and almost roared, "The Universe Stone, I will lend it to you." Duanmu Bai knew that leaving the Chinquin Palace with a Universe Stone would definitely be opposed by many people in the palace. However, for Duanmu Lu, even if everyone opposed, he had to do it. Palace Lord Duanmu Bai is indeed courageous. Nye Tian's expression suddenly became relaxed, and he said, "Thank you very much." Nye Tian's face was relaxed, but he was relieved in his heart. Just now, it was just a gamble. He was really afraid that Duanmu Bai would refuse. Luckily, Duanmu Bai did not disappoint and finally agreed. "Nye Tian, City Lord, the two conditions have been fulfilled. Can you release the sword seal now?" Duanmu Bai was not polite with Nye Tian and said directly, "Of course." Nye Tian smiled. Then he stood up and said, "Let's go to the martial arts field together." Nye Tian dared to ask for such a prize from Duanmu Bai. Of course, he was prepared for everything. In fact, 3 days ago, he had already thought of how to open Duanmu Lu's octopole sword seal. He was just waiting for Duanmu Bai to come. After a while, everyone's figures appeared in the martial arts field of the palace. Nye Tian and Duanmu Lu stood in the martial arts field, facing each other. Chapter 336. Heaven Luo City's City Lord Residence's martial arts field. Everyone was staring at Nye Tian and Duanmu Lu on the field. Duanmu Bai's eyes were wide open. There was nervousness, doubt, and excitement in his eyes, but most of it was doubt. 8 Supreme Sword Seal. Countless Sword Dao masters in the 3,000 small worlds were helpless against the mysterious Sword Seal. Did Nye Tian really have the ability to open it? "Daddy, can Big Brother Nye Tian really help Big Brother open the Sword Seal?" Duanmu Weiner stood beside Duanmu Bai with a worried expression and asked softly. She had seen Duanmu Bai cultivating under the suppression of the Sword Seal. Every time, he would be sweating profusely and in excruciating pain. But even under such suppression, Duanmu Lu's strength still reached the first level of the giant spirit. His terrifying talent was really rare. Wan'er, don't speak. Duanmu Bai was highly nervous and reminded Duanmu Wainer not to speak. Duanmu Wainer frowned and didn't dare to make another sound. Teacher, what do I have to do? On the martial arts field, Duanmu Lu didn't know what to do next and asked Nye Tian. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, what you have to do is very simple. Just keep attacking me. Huh? Duanmu Lu was stunned and had a puzzled expression. He didn't understand what Nye Tian meant. Nye Tian didn't explain too much and said directly, attack. Remember, don't have any concerns and don't hold back your strength. Just attack. If I don't ask you to stop, don't stop. Yes, Duanmu Bai might be puzzled, but seeing Nye Tian's serious face, he bowed and agreed. Buzz! In the next moment, 8 Supreme Kunwu appeared on Duanmu Bai's hand. The giant sword body danced and let out a deep sword hum. Teacher, sorry for the offense. Duanmu Bai shouted and quickly entered his battle state. Knowing that Nye Tian's strength was far above his, Duanmu Bai no longer had any scruples and attacked with all his might. Sword chi overflowed from the 8 extremities Kunwu sword and filled the air into a black sword light that pressed towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian stood on the spot and actually closed his eyes. He did not move at all as he gathered all his divine senses and used his heart to sense the sword hum that the 8 extremities Kunwu produced. In his previous life, Nye Tian was one of the 5 pinnacles of the Heaven Realm Sword Tao. His understanding of the sword seal was very thorough. Nye Tian knew very well how to break the innate sword seal. The Xiantian sword seal was something that a martial artist's origin spirit was born with. The method to open it could be said to be very simple, but could also be said to be very difficult. The key was 4 words: sword chi resonance. Every swordsman had a different sword chi, and each sword chi corresponded to a different frequency and rhythm. The key to opening the innate sword seal was to find a sword chi that had the same frequency and rhythm as the sword chi contained in the innate sword seal. When the 2 sword chi resonated, the sword seal could be opened. Unfortunately, the path of the sword Tao was more difficult than ordinary martial arts. Therefore, there were not many swordsmen and even fewer swordsmen who could produce sword chi. Wanting to find 2 sword chi with the same frequency and rhythm was like looking for a needle in a haystack. In the 3,000 small worlds, there were very few people who knew the method to open the sword seal. Even if someone knew the method, it was impossible to find a swordsman whose sword chi was connected. Therefore, in the 3,000 small worlds, swordsmen with the innate sword seal were basically useless because the sword seal could never be opened. If Duanmu Lu had not encountered Nye Tian, his 8 supreme sword seal would probably never be opened. When Duanmu Lu stabbed over with his sword, Nye Tian closed his eyes and listened to the sword sound and sword intent. He wanted to capture the frequency of the former sword chi. When the 8 supreme Kunwu was less than a meter away from Nye Tian, and the surging sword gleam had already brushed past his cheek, he suddenly opened his eyes. His body flashed with jade light, and the extreme wood jade sky armor was activated. At the same time, a wisp of sword chi surged out of his body and turned into a sword shield to protect his body. Bam! With a muffled sound, Nye Tian retreated a few steps. The proud sword divine wings appeared on his back, and with a light step, he leaped 10 meters into the air. What a fast movement technique! What a powerful sword chi! Duanmu Bai was 1,000 meters away from Nye Tian, but he could see very clearly that the movement of Nye Tian's body just now was extremely fast, and the sword chi that surged out of his body was far stronger than Duanmu Lu's sword chi. Nye Tian was a swordsman with dual sword hearts, while Duanmu Lu was only a sword chi swordsman. Moreover, he was suppressed by the 8 supreme sword seal, so it was naturally impossible for him to be compared to Nye Tian. Duanmu Lu, is this all you have? Nye Tian stabilized his body, looked at Duanmu Lu, and smiled indifferently. Under Duanmu Lu's attack, just now, Nye Tian couldn't grasp his sword chi. Listen to the sword sound and sword intent. For a swordsman, it wasn't an easy task, especially when Duanmu Lu's sword chi was suppressed by the 8 supreme sword seal, making it even harder to capture. If he couldn't even capture the frequency of Duanmu Lu's sword chi, how could he talk about sword chi resonance? Teacher, be careful. The battle intent in Duanmu Lu's heart was aroused, and the eighth supreme Kunwu body revealed its giant spirit true body. A huge black sword that was 40 meters long appeared, and a majestic aura was about to burst out. Very good. Nyetian smiled indifferently. When the eighth supreme Kunwu body's giant spirit true body was out, the frequency of the sword chi would be much stronger. Buzz! The huge body of the eight extremities Kunwu sword surged forward like a rolling black dragon. The sound of the sword roared and lingered for 3 days. Nyetian was focused and instantly revealed a hint of joy. He said excitedly, "This is the sound." After successfully capturing the frequency of Duanmu Lu's sword chi, the absolute heaven slash immediately appeared in Nyetian's hand. All the essence force in his body surged out like a river bursting through a dam, turning into endless sword chi that filled the space within 100 meters around him. At this moment, 2 small swords, one black and one white, appear between Nyetian's eyebrows. They were his proud sword heart and star soul sword heart. Adjust the frequency of my sword chi. Nyetian took a deep breath, and the 2 sword hearts between his eyebrows flickered, and the sword chi around him emitted a buzzing sound. The sword roar seemed to contain thousands of different sword chi, like the low chirping of insects. That's the rhythm. Suddenly, Nyetian confirmed the resonance point of the sword chi, and excitement appeared on his face. The sword heart between his eyebrows disappeared, and immediately the sword chi around him condensed into 12 huge sword shadows that were dozens of meters long. They fell from the sky like 12 pillars, inserted into the ground, and surrounded Duanmu Lu. The 12 sword shadows surged with sword chi, and the entire martial arts field was filled with a low sword roar, like the sound of a golden bell, which lasted for a long time. When Duanmu Lu saw this, he was stunned. In the next moment, he suddenly felt that the eighth supreme Kunwu body seemed to be out of control, and it began to tremble violently. His sword chi is so strong. Duanmu Bai was also stunned. When he felt the surging sword chi in the 12 sword shadows, his face turned pale. Duanmu Bai was a person who had seen sword principal grandmasters. Those swordsmen who had reached the realm of sword intent, sword power, and even sword spirit didn't have such a mighty momentum like Nyetian's. This was a kind of supreme comprehension of sword principle. Without this kind of comprehension of sword principle, no matter how high the realm of sword principle was, it couldn't be achieved. At this moment, the spiritual power of heaven and earth in the entire martial arts field suddenly surged and gathered towards the 12 huge sword shadows that Nyetian had set up. In the next moment, each sword shadow released a white pillar of light that soared into the sky and went straight to the clouds. Duanmu Lu was in the sword formation, and his face turned green. He saw that in each sword shadow, there were ancient virtual picture scrolls. Some were heaven and earth, some were mountains and rivers, some were dragons and phoenixes dancing, some were like fields and plateaus, and some were like hundreds of beasts galloping. Every virtual picture scroll looked extremely sacred, and they emitted an extremely powerful aura. It was simply like the manifestation of gods. At this moment, a loud voice sounded in Duanmu Lu's mind, surging sword chi, heaven and earth resonance. 8 Supreme Sword Seal, open. With the sound of open, the huge body of the 8 Supreme Kunwu sword suddenly spun faster and faster, and there was constantly surging sword chi. The thick and blunt outer layer of skin gradually disappeared, like a silkworm turning into a butterfly or a spirit snake shedding its skin. Waves of new power appeared, and it actually drove the momentum of heaven and earth. Outside the martial arts field, when Duanmu Bai and the others saw the phenomenon in the martial arts field, they all had a pious look on their faces. They were in awe and had the urge to prostrate and worship. They had never seen such a phenomenon of heaven and earth resonance. To them, everything in front of them was no different from a miracle. After a long time, the 8th Supreme Kunwu sword slowly stopped spinning, and the body of the sword underwent an obvious change. It was no longer a square, heavy ruler, but a real heavy sword. The body of the sword was dark and shiny, and it emitted a majestic and heavy momentum. At this moment, Duanmu knew that his 8th Supreme Sword Seal had been unsealed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the next moment, the virtual picture scrolls among the 12 sword shadows turned into light spots and entered the body of the 8th Supreme Kunwu sword. The 12 sword shadows disappeared immediately. Boom! Immediately after, Duanmu felt waves of sword chi gushing in from his dantian of his essence meridians and immediately exploded. It was like a tumbling wave that washed over his 9 essence meridians. His 9 essence meridians were almost about to explode. The blood in Duanmu's body kept on surging and was about to boil. I'm going to break through. Duanmu immediately reacted. He sat cross-legged and began to break through to the next realm. There was originally still blood and chi in Duanmu's body that had not been refined. In addition to the sword chi contained in Nietian's 12 sword shadows, as well as the surging sword chi and the heaven and earth resonance, it was simply a matter of time before he broke through. In just a moment, Duanmu stood up again. His entire aura immediately became different. It was much stronger and sharper, like a sharp sword that had just been forged. Teacher, my 8th Supreme Sword Seal has been unsealed. Duanmu looked at Nietian with a face of surprise. When he saw that Nietian's face was ghastly pale, he hurried forward and asked, Teacher, are you all right? Nietian smiled slightly, indicating that he was fine. The sword formation just now had consumed a large amount of essence force from Nietian, so he was just a little weak. Teacher, thank you. Duanmu was filled with gratitude and said sincerely. Nietian smiled indifferently and said, Rascal, you are now at the 4th level of the giant spirit realm. Furthermore, you are a swordsman with sword heart. Chapter 337. Duanmu would never have thought that his breakthrough just now was from the 2nd level of the giant spirit to the 4th level of the giant spirit. The most important thing was that he had directly nurtured the sword heart. 8 Extremes sword heart. What Duanmu did not know was that not only did he refine the remaining blood chi in his body, he had also absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the entire training grounds, as well as the sword chi from Nietian's sword formation. That was why he could directly raise his strength by 2 levels and nurture the 8 Extremes sword heart. In order to help Duanmu activate the 8 Extremes sword seal, Nietian had used his supreme comprehension of the way of the sword to forcibly adjust his sword chi to the same frequency and rhythm as the 8 Extremes sword heart sword chi, which caused the sword chi to resonate. Forcibly changing the frequency of one sword chi looked simple, but in reality, it was extremely difficult. Not to mention the 3,000 small worlds. Even in the heaven realm, celestial realm, the number of people who could do this could be counted on 2 hands. So for Duanmu to be able to meet Nietian, it was definitely because of his ancestors' luck. At this time, everyone walked over. Duanmu sensed the change in Duanmu's body and was simply stunned. His eyes stared at the ladder, and he could not say a word for a long time. At this time, Duanmu attitude towards Nietian had completely changed. Just based on the method that Nietian had used to help Duanmu activate the 8 Extreme Sword Seal, it was enough to make him prostrate himself in admiration, and he was sincerely convinced. Duanmu could not imagine how a 16-year-old youth could explode with such terrifying power, especially the sword formation formed by the 12 sword images, and the resonance of the heaven and earth within the sword images. All of them made one's mind agitated and unable to control themselves. Nietian did not wait for Duanmu to speak, and spoke first. Palace Master Duanmu, don't forget our agreement. Before the Dragon Blood Martial meet starts tomorrow, I want to see the Chinquin stone appear at the venue. Good. Duanmu nodded heavily and laughed. Mr. Nietan, rest assured, I will immediately return to Chinquin Palace, before the martial meet starts tomorrow, I will definitely send the Chinquan stone to the venue. Good. Nietian smiled and replied, I believe that with your status, Duanmu Palace Master Duanmu Palace, you will not go back. After that, Duanmu Bai left, and Nietian and the others returned to their respective residences. Tomorrow was the start of the Dragon Blood martial meet. Nietian needed to have a good rest and adjust himself to his peak condition. Duanmu Heaven, Duanmu Mu Tian Master Duanmu Chi, Duanmu Saint Heaven, the Chi in spirit that the martial spirit Duanmu rank Duanmu was the master was that second level, and in the third level. Mu, in was that too, that if was that Duanmu Gua's spirit and Mo was that he as spirit, and Tian Duan as Mu. Of course, this was also related to the complexity of the astral soul. The more complex the astral soul, the longer it would take for it to be copied. Furthermore, Niet Tian discovered that the power of the astral soul used in the Star Soul Tablet came from the awakened astral energy in the Primal Star Stones. Therefore, the higher Niet Tian's strength, the more astral energy he awakened, and the higher the efficiency of the Astral Soul Tablet. Currently, there were 3 rank 2 Astral Souls on the Star Soul Tablet, Extreme Wood Armor, Earth Spear, Sky Fiend Slash, and 1 rank 3 Astral Soul, Infernal Ghost Warrior. This was enough for Nietian. At this time, Little Nine's injuries had also healed, and with the Phantom Snow Fox and Corpse Lord, Nietian was extremely confident that he could become the champion of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. On the second day, when the beautiful rays of the morning sun slowly rose from the east, the forest outside of Tianluo City was already filled with people. Tianluo City was too small, so the Dragon Blood Martial Meet could only be held in the vast forest outside of Tianluo City. The vast forest had a circumference of tens of thousands of meters. On top of the forest, it was filled with people, a dense black mass. As far as the eye could see, there were heads everywhere. It was a sea of people, and it was noisy. This forest had been remodeled, and the outer perimeter had become a viewing area, which could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people. The inner perimeter, within 1,000 meters, was the martial field. On the martial field, there were many battle stages. Each battle stage had a circumference of tens of meters and looked extremely sturdy. There were not many battle stages on the martial field, only about 200 or so. Nietian had said before that there was no need for so many battle stages. There were a total of close to 100,000 people who had signed up for the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. Other than the young martial artists of the Nanshan region, there were also martial artists from the other 3 regions, and even some geniuses from the Sumi Spirit Capital. Although the Dragon Blood Martial Meet was held in Tianluo City, the organizing work was all done by the Yuan Chamber of Commerce and Gu Yi. Nietian only took out a huge sum of yuan crystals. In any case, he had received quite a lot of entrance and registration fees. The figures of Nietian and the rest appeared at the martial meet. This time, the people from the City Lord's mansion had basically all come. Nietian repeatedly warned Nero and the rest not to stray too far from elderly, Qiushan, and the rest. With Luo Fun as an example, Nietian would naturally be even more careful. Aoki Lily and Ding Yifun's ability to handle matters is indeed not bad. Although this martial field is simple, it has everything. There are even VIP viewing platforms. Nietian saw a high platform in the center of the martial field from afar. The location was very good, and one could watch all the battle stages at the same time. Furthermore, there were many pavilions built. It was clearly a viewing platform specially prepared for some important figures. At this time, Gu Yi and the rest also appeared. Seeing Nietian from afar, they warmly greeted, "Brother Nia." Behind him, other than Tong Fu, Adele, Shui Linglong, and the rest, there was also a sturdy, curly-bearded man. That person looked extremely imposing. He walked with the wind, with thick eyebrows, big eyes, a wide nose, and square cheeks. He gave off a very strong deterrent force. Nietian swept his divine sense across this sturdy man and was quite surprised. He actually couldn't sense his strength. Nietian guessed that this person should be an expert from the Alchemist Association's Damu Hall. He should at least be at the commander level. The Danwu Hall was the organization that the Danwu Imperial Guards of the Alchemist Association belonged to. The ordinary guards of the Danwu Imperial Guards were at the Giant Spirit Realm. The captains were at the True Element Realm. The Imperial Guard commanders were at the Spirit Wheel Realm. As for the Imperial Guard Hall Master, his strength was unfathomable. Therefore, Nietian guessed that this person in front of him should be a Spirit Wheel Realm martial artist. Old Gu. Nietian took 2 steps forward and smiled faintly. He looked at that sturdy man and said, "This is—" Gu Yi chuckled and said, "Is my good brother, the Danwu Hall's 7th commander, Zhao Qua. I asked him to come and help the Dragon Blood Martial Group." Nietian nodded faintly and smiled faintly at Zhao Qua as a greeting. "You must be the Nietian City Lord, right?" Zhao Qua opened his mouth, and his voice was like thunder. He was born with a loud voice. He said, "I have long heard about you from Big Brother Gu. Seeing you today, you are indeed a young talent." "You flatter me." Nietian smiled faintly and said in his heart, "This guy looks quite fierce. I didn't expect him to be so polite." Nietian City Lord. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded behind him. Ding Yifun's figure appeared. Beside Ding Yifun, apart from Aoki Lily, there was also a green-robed elder. He looked extremely skinny, like a hemp stick. However, his eyes were shrewd, and his body naturally emitted a dignified aura. He must be an expert from the Dayuan Merchant Association. "Young Lord Ding, Miss Aoki." Nietian smiled and greeted them. He glanced at the green-robed elder and was stunned. He didn't expect that he couldn't even sense the strength of this elder. Aoki Lily smiled. Although she restrained her smile, her charming aura couldn't be hidden. She said in a seductive voice, "This is the vice president of our merchant association, Mr. Lu Liankai." Nietian nodded slightly and said in his heart, "No wonder he is so strong. He is the vice president of the Yuan Merchant Association." Although Nietian couldn't see the true strength of Zhao Qua and Lu Liankai, he could roughly feel that both of them were the Divine Wheel Realm. Compared to Elder Li, Zhao Qua was slightly weaker, and Lu Liankai was even weaker. Then, everyone stopped chatting and walked toward the high platform in the center of the battlefield. Nietian calculated in his heart. The Dragon Blood Martial Arts Conference had Zhao Qua and Lu Liankai, 2 Divine Wheel Realm experts, to hold the line. In addition, Elder Li was watching from the side. There shouldn't be any major problems. What worried him now was that Duanmu Bai hadn't arrived yet. This made him a little anxious. The Chinquan Stone was used to select the participating warriors. If he didn't arrive in time, it would be troublesome. Furthermore, Nietian wanted to rely on the appearance of Duanmu Bai to give all the warriors present a huge shock. At this time, the tens of thousands of warriors outside the martial arts arena were already impatient and were about to start cursing. "Why hasn't the battle started yet? I've waited for half a day. My giant spear spirit can't wait any longer." That's right. Look, there are only 200 arenas on the martial arts arena. With so many of us participating in the martial gathering, we'll have to compete for years. Who cares how long it takes? I'm going to be the champion of the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering. The Dragon Blood Stones will definitely be mine. No one can snatch them from me. The Dragon Blood Martial Gathering had already announced on the list that the top 100 would receive the reward. Only the top 50 would receive the Dragon Bloodstones. The Dragon Blood Martial Gathering's Dragon Bloodstone reward was 50% Dragon Bloodstones. The champion would receive 20% Dragon Bloodstones. The second place would receive 10% Dragon Bloodstones, and the third place would receive 5% Dragon Bloodstones. The remaining 15% would be distributed to the top 50 warriors of the martial gathering. On the high platform, Gu Yi saw that everyone was waiting anxiously. He glanced at Nietian and said, "Brother Nia, can you announce the star of the martial gathering?" Nietian frowned slightly and said, "Let's wait a while more. Nietian City Lord, you said that you would arrange an audition for the martial gathering. I wonder how you will do it." Ding Yifun looked at the hundreds of thousands of spectators and participants of the martial gathering and could not help but ask, "It's here." Nietian acted as if he did not hear Ding Yifun's words. A hint of surprise flashed across his face as he looked towards the distant sky. Everyone followed Nyat Tion's gaze and immediately became petrified. "Look, what's that?" At this time, someone pointed to the sky and shouted, "This!" Everyone raised their heads. When they saw the scene in the sky, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. In the sky above Heaven Luo City, a figure soared through the sky. This figure held up the sky with one hand and was actually carrying a 100-meter-long silver-white boulder. Under the sunlight, the silver-white boulder was sparkling and translucent, emitting a dazzling light. Chapter 338. Duanmu Bai descended from the sky with a 100-meter-long boulder in his hand, descending from the sky like a demonic god. Tian looked from afar and could clearly see that the boulder was wrapped in a faint layer of essence energy. It was obvious that Duanmu Bai had flown over with the boulder. Duanmu Bai's strength is indeed strong. Tian frowned slightly and thought to himself, flying through the air is something that even a true element realm martial artist can achieve. However, Duanmu Bai, who is carrying a 100-meter-long boulder and walking through the air, will definitely need an enormous amount of origin energy. Duanmu Bai's strength is definitely above Elder Li's. The boulder under Duanmu Bai's feet was 100 meter long, just like a small hill. Even if it was an ordinary boulder, its weight would definitely be in the hundreds of millions of kilograms. However, Tian knew that the boulder above Duanmu Bai's head was definitely the most precious treasure of the Qingquan Palace, the Universe Stone. The Universe Stone was a true polar jellyfish stone. Its density was far above ordinary stones. Such a 100-meter-long true polar jellyfish stone would definitely weigh several billion kilograms. Duanmu Bai was actually able to carry something that weighed several billion kilograms and fly in the sky. His strength was simply unimaginable. Everyone on the dojo stared at the figure in the sky in a daze. The shock in their hearts couldn't be any greater. This person is so strong. After a long time, Zhao Kuo, who was beside Gu Yi, said in astonishment. As the 7th commander of the Danwu Hall, Zhao Kuo's strength was already at the 2nd level of the Divine Wheel. However, he knew that it was impossible for him to carry such a boulder and fly in the sky. Lu Liankai, who was beside Aokiki Lily, also widened his eyes. There was a rare look of reverence in his eyes. "It's Daddy." At a certain moment, Duanmu Weiner, who was behind Tian, suddenly shouted. Everyone on the high platform seemed to have woken up from a dream. "Big brother Tian, this person is so strong," Yuro whispered as she pulled Tian's hand. Her face was already flushed from the shock. Tian faintly smiled and said, "Ninth sister, you will definitely be more powerful than him in the future." "Really?" Yuro's eyes flashed like black gems, her face filled with joy. "Of course." Tian nodded solemnly. The people at the side were stunned by the conversation between the siblings and did not know what to say. "Brother Nya, that person in the air is Palace Master Duanmu, White Palace, right?" Gu Yi swallowed his saliva and asked Tian. "Yes." Tian nodded lightly and said with a smile, "There's something I haven't told you yet. Heaven Luo City has become allies with Qingquan Palace. Palace Lord Duanmu is here to deliver something to me." Heaven Luo City and Qingquan Palace have formed an alliance? Gu Yi screamed, his jaw almost dropped. The others around him also looked at Tian. Their expressions seemed to say, "Are you messing around?" Heaven Luo City and Qingquan Palace. These two forces were separated by hundreds of thousands of mountains. How could they form an alliance? Just as everyone was bewildered, Duanmu Bai's figure had already arrived in the sky above the martial field. "Tian City Lord, I have brought you the Qingquan stone you wanted." The Duanmu Bai's voice was like rolling thunder in the air. "Qingquan stone." When these 3 words were spoken, every single one of them was like a clap of thunder from the 9 heavens, causing everyone present to be stunned. Qingquan stone, the most precious treasure of Qingquan Palace. Why would it suddenly appear in the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering? He is the Palace Master of Qingquan Palace, Duanmu Master Bai. Suddenly, someone recognized Duanmu Bai and screamed. Immediately, A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The entire martial gathering grounds, the hundreds of thousands of people, were on the verge of exploding. Dwanu Masterby, why is he here? Is that the Chinquin stone in his hand? You idiot, Dwanu Masterby has already said that it is the Chinquin stone that is the most precious treasure of Chinquin Palace. It is indeed beautiful. Look at the patterns, look at the light. It is simply a supreme treasure. Just now, what did Dwanu Masterby mean? He is here to deliver the Chinquin stone to Nietion City Lord. What is the relationship between Nietion City Lord and Dwanu Masterby? He even gave him the most precious treasure of the palace, the Chinquin stone. He can't be an illegitimate child, right? Illegitimate your sister? With Dwanu Masterby's strength, with such status, he can have as many children as he wants. Is there a need for an illegitimate child? At the martial gathering grounds, there were many discussions, and it was about to explode. On the high platform, Gu, Yi, and the rest finally heaved a sigh of relief. Absolutely never would have thought that the alliance between Tian Luo City and Chinquin Palace that Nietion spoke of was actually true. And looking at Dwanu Masterby's posture, he did not have the slightest bit of arrogance, and was even somewhat respectful towards Nietion. This was too inconceivable. It had already exceeded everyone's ability to accept it. When the 10,000 little rabbits in his heart stopped jumping, Gu Yi licked his chapped lips, waiting to see what would happen next. Nietion looked at Dwanu Masterby, who was in the sky, and shouted loudly, "Dwanu Palace Lord, it has been hard on you." It had to be said, Dwanu Masterby's performance made Nietion extremely satisfied. He wanted to make use of Dwanu Masterby and the Chinquin stone to create a sensation, to shock everyone, to let everyone know that Tian Luo City and Chinquin Palace were tied together, so as to deter those forces that were eager to try. Dwanu Masterby laughed loudly, and immediately after, his mighty voice landed. "Everyone, I am the Palace Lord of Chinquin Palace, Dwanu Bai. I hereby announce that Chinquin Palace and Tian Luo City have formed a friendly alliance. If any forces or individuals want to harm Tian Luo City, they must first go through the Chinquin Palace." The thunderous voice landed, resonating in everyone's heart, shaking everyone until they were crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. After Dwanu Bai finished speaking, he waved his hand, and with a wong sound, the Chinquin stone swept up the surrounding space and emitted a deep and loud sound, as if a mountain was smashing down. This scene caused everyone in the martial gathering to be scared out of their wits. So scared that it was as if their legs were tied with 10,000 tons of sandbags, unable to move an inch. Rumble. The Chinquin stone fell like a sharp sword. It pierced into the ground 10 meters deep. Immediately, the entire martial field shook. A layer of chi wave rolled out, causing sand and dust to soar into the sky. Everyone felt a majestic aura sweep past. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. Nietion watched from afar, the corner of his mouth raised into a complacent arc. It seemed like Dwanu Bai was not stupid. He already knew the reason why Nietion wanted the Chinquin stone. It was to intimidate everyone. Since he had already killed Nietion's pirate ship, then he might as well do it more thoroughly and give everyone the strongest shock. After a long time, the sand and dust in the sky of the martial gathering gradually settled, and everything returned to normal, but the Chinquin stone was already standing at the entrance of the martial gathering. Dwanu Bai's figure descended from the sky and directly landed on the stage. "Palace Master Dwanu, thank you very much." Nietion did not stand on ceremony and only smiled faintly. Dwanu Bai's actions today was extremely timely, announcing to everyone that Heaven Luo City was definitely not a little sheep, but an abyss-hidden dragon. Nietion City Lord is too courteous. This is what I should do as an ally. Dwanu Bai nodded slightly, his face calm, without the slightest bit of arrogance. Gu Yi and the rest looked at Nietion from time to time. The expressions on their faces were about to die. Who would have thought that Nietion would actually be able to make the dignified palace master of the Chinquin Palace to be so courteous, and even bring the palace's most precious treasure, the Chinquin stone. After Duanmu Bai met everyone, he casually sat down and waited for the Dragon Blood Martial gathering to begin. After a moment, Nietian greeted Gu Yi and the rest, then stepped out, his figure appearing in the sky above the martial gathering, countless sword images forming a pair of wings on his back. Everyone below raised their heads to look at Nietian, not knowing what he was going to do. Nietian smiled faintly and slowly said, "Everyone, I am the Lord of Heaven Luo City, Nietian. Thank you very much for coming to the Dragon Blood Martial gathering." Nietian's voice was not loud, but had a mysterious power that allowed everyone present to hear it very clearly. After a few polite gestures, Nietian continued, "There are many warriors who have signed up for the Dragon Blood Martial gathering, so we can't let all the warriors fight one by one. This city lord has prepared a selection stone for everyone, which is the most precious treasure of the Chinquin Palace, the Chinquin stone. All the warriors who are participating in the martial competition must first pass the test of the Chinquin stone. If you can strike out a palm print or fist print on the Chinquin stone, you will pass and can participate in the following martial arts competition. If you can't do it, I'm sorry, I can only say that you don't have the qualifications to participate in the Dragon Blood martial art. Now let's begin. This city lord is willing to be the first to take the test." After Ngan finished speaking, he did not give the others a chance to react, and leapt in front of the Chinquin stone. It really is the true polar jellyfish stone. Observing the Chinquin stone from a close distance, Nietian was 100% sure that the huge stone in front of him was the true polar jellyfish stone. All the warriors looked over, wanting to see what this selection would be like. The true polar jellyfish stone was a very special ore. It was extremely flexible and had almost 100% resistance against elemental energy attacks. To leave a mark on the true polar jellyfish stone, one could only use the purest physical strength. With the hardness of the true polar jellyfish stone, to strike out a fist print, one would need at least 1,000,000 gene of strength. 1,000,000 gene of strength could be achieved by an ordinary 5th-tier Wanxiang warrior. The Dragon Blood Martial gathering only allowed warriors below the age of 30 to participate. If one had not reached the 5th tier by the age of 30, even if they entered the Dragon Blood martial art, they would only be cannon fodder. Nietian looked at the Chinquin stone in front of him, calculating in his heart, "I am now at the 1st tier of the giant spirit realm, and have awakened the power of 640,000 stars in my body. My pure strength is about 50 million gene. If combined with martial techniques, the power I can explode with is definitely the strength of one dragon. But it's better to keep a low profile and not cause too much of a commotion." If Nietian used all his strength in a punch, he could definitely explode with the strength of more than one dragon. But even the strength of one dragon could not cause any damage to the true polar jellyfish stone. Also, the true polar jellyfish stone was extremely flexible and could continuously absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, quickly recovering. Therefore, Nietian directly used the Chinquin stone as a strength-testing monument. The Chinquin stone is the most precious treasure of the Chinquin Palace. How can a fist print or palm print be left on it? Is the Nietian city lord lying? Yeah. Don't tell me he doesn't want us to participate in the Dragon Blood martial gathering. Shut up. The Nietian city lord is concentrating. Don't grumble. Behind Nietian, whispers of discussion arose. Nietian did not pay attention to them. With a faint smile, he took a step forward, his Yuan meridians slightly activated, and his Yuan power surged. He slowly raised his arm and punched out. Pong! With a dull sound, the Chinquin stone shook slightly. Everyone focused their eyes and saw that on the Chinquin stone, a deep dent had appeared. It was at least half a meter deep, and in the center of the dent was a clear palm print. Chapter 339. This. Everyone gasped when they saw the deep dent and clear fist mark on the Chinquin stone. Nietian curled his lips slightly. He had already deliberately controlled his strength, but he did not expect that he would not be able to control it, and actually punched out a half-meter deep dent. On the high platform, Duanmu Bai saw the deep fist mark on the Chinquin stone, and his expression changed slightly. He was shocked in his heart. The fist mark is actually half a meter deep. Could it be that Nietion's pure strength has reached 50 million gene? 50 million gene. That was the strength of half a dragon. Nietion was only at the first level of the giant spirit realm. How could he have such terrifying strength? Duanmu Bai did not know that Nietion was already deliberately restraining himself. Otherwise, his full strength punch would have at least left a 1-meter deep fist mark. In the martial field, countless gazes looked at Nietion, their eyes filled with deep respect. This was the strong making the weak submit. At the same time, several cold gazes from different directions locked onto Nietion. Dong Fengdu and Chu Shifeng looked at Nietion. Other than fear, there was even more viciousness in their eyes. Behind Dong Fengdu, Xie Feng, the Hall Master of the Azure Dragon Hall of the Deity Transformation Sect, whispered, "Young Master, Nietion's strength is very strange. If you encounter him, you must not fight him." "This young master knows. There's no need to remind me." Dong Fengdu replied coldly, and said in his heart, "Nietion, it will be best if you can meet those from the Su-Mi spirit capital. That way, it will save me a lot of trouble." Dong Fengdu knew that the Dragon Blood Martial Group had a few experts from the Su-Mi spirit capital, and Gu Qiulin was one of them. Presumably, those geniuses would not be happy to see Nietion in the limelight. On the other side, Gu Qiulin also stared coldly at Nietion, his eyes almost spitting fire. Beside him, there were two young men, one fat and one thin. At first glance, these two people didn't seem to be anything special. If you threw them into a crowd, you would definitely not be able to find them. However, their strength was extremely strong. The thin one was at the first level of true element, while the fat one was at the second level of true element. To be able to achieve such strength at such a young age, his talent was truly terrifying. These two fellows were both figures on Su-Mi Spirit City's genius list. The thin one was called Qiu Shaokong, and the fat one was called Tang Xiao. Gu Qiulin was only the 21st genius on the Su-Mi Spirit Capital Genius list, while Qiu Shaokong and Tang Xiao were ranked higher than him. One was 17th, and the other was 15th. Tang Xiao was merely ranked 15th, but his strength was already above the number 1 genius of the Southern Mountain region, Luo Fun. From this, it could be seen that the geniuses of the Su-Mi Spirit Capital were several levels higher than those of the South Mountain region. "Brother Gu, is this person the Heaven Luo City Lord Nietion who defeated you with a single sword?" Qiu Shaokong noticed that there was something strange in Gu Qiulin's gaze, and he spoke sarcastically, and his words revealed a dense sense of ridicule. And, although Gu Qiulin was extremely unwilling, he still nodded his head. The news of Gu Qiulin's defeat to Nietion was spread by Dong Fengdu, because the latter knew that the more people knew about it, the more hatred Gu Qiulin had towards Nietion. Tang Xiao faintly smiled, and the muscles on his fat face trembled. Stroking the sparse stubble at the corner of his mouth, he said, "This person's strength is indeed somewhat strange. He is only at the first level of the giant spirit realm, but he can actually punch out with a strength of 50 million gene. He is worthy of my attention." Qiu Shaokong nodded his head and suddenly thought of something and said with a smile, "Brother Tang, I heard that your strange 13th brother will also participate in the Dragon Blood Martial meet. Is that right?" Tang Xiao frowned and said in a low voice, "That trash ran away from home last time and then met with trouble. He ran to the Wen Qin Empire's Tang family branch to ask for help, and was sent back to the Su-Mi Spirit Capital by the branch. The Patriarch grounded him for a few months, and this time he made a fuss about coming out again. The Patriarch dotes on him a lot, and actually agreed. I think he is currently at the martial meet." Mentioning this 13th brother, Tang Xiao did not have the slightest bit of concern, but his face was filled with hatred, as if the former was not his brother, but an enemy. Qiu Shaokong laughed and said, "Your strange 13th brother, I wonder what kind of shocking performance he will have in the Dragon Blood Martial meet." "Humph." Tang Xiao laughed cold, and a hint of killing intent flashed in his eyes. He said in his heart, "Tang 13, you better not let me meet you, or else I will definitely kill you on the stage. Tang Xiao, the 13th brother he spoke of, was none other than Tang 13. And not far from Tang Xiao and the others, two other gazes also locked onto Nietian. Zi, with your current strength, can you fight against Nietian? Beside Mr. Purple, a handsome youth with scarlet-red eyes asked gloomily. No. Mr. Purple shook his head, unable to conceal the shock on his face. When he left the ancient Bloody Massacre tomb, Nietian clearly only had the strength of a 9th-level Wanxiang, and he had just advanced. In just half a month, the latter actually had the cultivation of a 1st-level giant spirit. This kind of cultivation speed was truly terrifying. Looks like I have to personally take action. The scarlet-eyed youth beside Mr. Purple smiled coldly, and a cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes. The scarlet-eyed youth was none other than the Doomsday Flame, Mo Sure. In just over a month, Mo Sure had already grown from a child to a youth, and his strength had also reached the 1st-level giant spirit, the same as Nietian. Although Mo Sure's strength was only at the 1st-level giant spirit, his true battle strength definitely exceeded the 1st-level true essence. Even Zihua, who was beside him, was no match for him. Mo Sure wanted to obtain the Dragon Bloodstone and also wanted to kill Nietian. He did not care who was beside Nietian. In his opinion, the Ancient Will, the Dayuan Chamber of Commerce, and the Qingquan Palace were all threats. Mo Sure absorbed the blood chi in Zihua's body and helped him completely fuse with the magic flower Blood Lotus. At this moment, there was no demonic fire aura on his body, and he was no different from an ordinary martial artist. But the growth of his strength far exceeded that of an ordinary martial artist. Based on this growth rate, Mo Sure's strength would reach the Divine Wheel realm in less than 3 years, and he would reach the Heavenly Emperor realm in 10 years. If he chose to hide now, even if Nietian had extraordinary means, he would not be able to find him. But he already could not wait anymore, and wanted to compete with human geniuses. This time, Mo Sure personally participated in the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. Not only did he want to become the champion, he also wanted to kill Nietian. In front of the Qingquan stone, Nietian smiled faintly. He sensed that someone was staring at him, but he did not care. Now that he had more and more trump cards, he was getting stronger and stronger, so he did not fear any enemy, even if it was the genius of Sumi Ling Capital, or the Doomsday Flame, or the assassins of Ling Xiantian Pavilion. The Qingquan stone was struck by Nietian and had a deep depression, but in the blink of an eye, it recovered to its original state without the slightest damage. Nietian let Gao Han guard the Qingquan stone and supervise the test, then flew back to the high platform. With the deterrence of Duanmu Bai, even if there were people who were dissatisfied with the qualifier test, they did not dare to show it. There were close to 100,000 people participating in the qualifier test. Luckily, the Qingquan stone was big enough and could allow several people to test at the same time. When the first day of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet ended, the qualifier came to an end. The qualifier directly eliminated the majority of the participants. Originally, there were close to 100,000 martial artists, but after the qualifier, there were only about 3,000 left. These 3,000 people were the cream of the crop among the 100,000 people, and their strength was at least at the 5th level of the Wanxiang realm. With regard to this result, Nietian was very satisfied. With 3,000 people participating in the Dragon Blood martial art and 200 arenas, the Dragon Blood martial meet would end in at most 2 days. After the qualifier ended, Nietian did not stay any longer. After bidding farewell to Gu Yi and the rest, he brought everyone back to the City Lord's mansion. The following arrangements for the Dragon Blood martial art were all arranged by Gu Yi and the Yuan Chamber of Commerce. Nietian only needed to participate in the competition in peace. Duanmu Bai planned to leave after the Dragon Blood martial meet, so he temporarily stayed in the Heaven Luo City's City Lord's mansion. After interacting with the people around Nietian, Duanmu Bai was even more surprised. He did not expect that the people around Nietian were all more abnormal than the last, especially Rui, Qinyu, and Elderly. They made him feel even more incredulous. At this moment, Duanmu Bai increasingly felt that Duanmu Lu's apprenticeship with Nye Tian was an extremely wise decision. Just as they arrived at the entrance of the city lord's mansion, the guard of the city lord's mansion, Wang Erxi, ran out from afar and shouted loudly, "City lord, you're finally back. What happened?" Nye Tian saw Wang Erxi's forehead full of sweat, and his face could not help but darken. Wang Erxi said anxiously, "Someone trespassed into the city lord's mansion. This subordinate did not allow him to enter, but he insisted on entering. Who is so daring?" Nye Tian frowned and shouted in a low voice, "Where is he?" Now that Heaven Luo City had just announced an alliance with Qingquan Palace, could it be that there was still someone who dared to provoke the city lord's mansion? Wang Erxi said, he is your friend, called 1314, and is currently waiting in the main hall. Tang 13. Nye Tian suddenly froze, and then immediately smiled. He turned around to look at Tang Yuyu, who was behind him. Before Nye Tian could turn around, Tang Yuyu had already madly rushed over like the wind. Nye Tian was speechless. This woman was indeed like the wind. Tang Yuyu waited for Tang 13 to come find him, and his heart was almost moldy. Now that the latter had appeared, how could he endure it? In the main hall of the city lord's mansion, a young man sat leisurely, carefully tasting the tasteless Nanshan maple red. He looked like he was enjoying it very much. Tang 13. Just then, a figure suddenly appeared outside the main hall, and a clear voice mixed with a slight tremble. Tang, Yuyu. Tang 13 suddenly stood up, and with a bang, the teacup in her hand fell to the ground. When he saw the face of the girl in front of him clearly, he immediately felt an explosion in his head, and his mind became blank. At this moment, Tang 13 felt like he had stopped breathing, and the world turned upside down. The entire world became empty, and there was only one person, Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu, a girl he had missed for countless days and nights, a girl he would never be able to forget. At this moment, this girl was standing in front of him, and she even called out his name. Tang 13 felt the blood in his body churn, and churn. Tang 13, we will never be separated again. In the next moment, the girl in front of him suddenly ran over and jumped into his arms. At this moment, Tang 13 smelled the girl's warm body fragrance, and finally confirmed that he wasn't dreaming. What kind of me would make you risk your life for me? What kind of you would make my trip worthwhile? What kind of me would make you Tang 13? Chapter 340. In a small courtyard in the city lord's palace, Nye Tian and Tang 13 sat facing each other. Tang 13 came to find Nye Tian to thank him for finding Tang Yuyu for him. However, ever since this guy arrived, he had been laughing foolishly. Tang 13, you didn't sneak out again this time, did you? Nye Tian looked at the laughing Tang 13 and asked. Nye Tian already knew that Tang 13 had gone to the Fengqin Empire's Tang family branch to ask for help. In the end, he was sent back to Sumi Ling City by the Tang family branch and was grounded by Tang Hao. That was why he couldn't find Tang Yuyu. Nye Tian guessed that Tang 13 had snuck out again. Unfortunately, he guessed wrong. Tang 13 was able to leave Sumi Ling City with Tang Hao's permission. Otherwise, forget about Sumi Ling City. He wouldn't even be able to take half a step out of the Tang family's front door. What did you say? Tang 13 laughed foolishly. He was stunned as if he had just woken up from a dream. Ever since he met Tang Yuyu, he had been in a daze. Nye Tian shook his head speechlessly and asked, You came from Sumi Ling City? Sumi Ling City? Tang 13 was stunned again. After a long while, he finally reacted. He suddenly thought of something and recovered a bit. He said, Nye Tian, you have to be careful this time. There are a few abnormal people in Sumi Ling City. If you meet them, you'll be in trouble. How abnormal? Nye Tian smiled slightly. Tang 13 paused and said with a serious face, More abnormal than that Luo Fan you killed. HM? Nye Tian was slightly surprised and asked, Do you know them? Among all the people Nye Tian had met, Luo Fan's talent could be considered one of the best. If the person Tang 13 was talking about was stronger than Luo Fan, then it was indeed worth paying attention to. Tang Xiao. Tang 13 said a name and warned Nietian with a serious face. If you run into this person, you must be careful. When Tang 13 said this name, her eyes flashed with uncontrollable anger. At the same time, there was a hint of fear. Tang Xiao. Nietian was slightly surprised and asked, "A member of the Tang family?" "Yes." Tang 13 nodded, but didn't reveal any more information. Nietian frowned and wondered, if Tang Xiao is from the Tang clan, then why is Tang 13 so afraid of him? Is their relationship not good? Nietian didn't think too much about it. He wasn't worried about Tang 13. Tang 13's martial arts talent was indeed not bad. Right now, he was already at the first level of the giant spirit realm. Moreover, Nietian could feel that his ghost was getting stronger and stronger. A few months ago, when he left Blue Cloud City, he was only at the manifestation realm. In just a few months, his strength had almost risen by a whole realm. It was truly terrifying. It looked like Tang 13 really did train hard while she was grounded at home. With the ghost eye, Tang 13 was definitely not a pushover. The next day, the Dragon Blood martial art officially began. When the sky was just beginning to brighten, the martial gathering was already packed with people. The Dragon Blood martial art gathering gathered almost all the young geniuses of the South Mountain region. There were even geniuses from the other 3 regions and the Sumeru spirit capital. It could be said to be a grand gathering of the 3,000 small worlds. Nietian and the others arrived early and went directly to the high platform in the center of the martial field. Standing on the high platform, Nietian scanned the area. Although the entire martial field was crowded, it was orderly. The outer ring was the spectator area. The inner ring was the battle area. The outermost ring was guarded by the Danwu Imperial Guard and the Yuan Chamber of Commerce. At this moment, every stage in the martial field was guarded by 3 martial artists, 2 guards and 1 judge. The participating martial artists lined up in front of the stage to receive their battle cards. The rules for the following martial competition were simple. It was a negative point elimination system. Winning a match was 0 points. Losing a match or drawing a match was 1 point. If the score was less than 3 points, the person would be directly eliminated. In the entire process of the martial competition, it was useless no matter how many matches you won. If you lost 3 matches, you would be eliminated. This method of battle was very fair to all the participating martial artists. It was to avoid the early elimination of powerful martial artists when they met each other. Of course, these are the rules of the early stage. After the top 100 were decided, the rules would change. There were about 3,000 people left in the Dragon Blood martial art gathering. These 3,000 people were all at least the 5th level of the Wanxiang realm. Those who could fight their way into the top 100 were definitely powerful martial artists. Seeing that it was almost time, Nietian informed Qiushan and the others of his plans and went to collect his duel token. Apart from Nietian, Rui Qinyu, Aoki Yuri, Ding Yifun, Tong Fu, Tang 13, Tang Yiyu, Duanmu Lu, Duanmu Weiner, and the others would also participate in the martial competition. Because the 3 lay brothers had not fully recovered from their injuries, Elderly did not allow them to participate. Several people received their battle cards at different arenas to avoid a situation where they would kill each other later. Number 14. After receiving his battle card, Nietian waited quietly at the side of the arena. The other martial artists recognized him and pointed at him while discussing, seeming to be very respectful. Nietian was not worried about the strength of Rui Qinyu and the others. If nothing unexpected happened, they should be able to fight their way into the top 100. After a while, all the participating martial artists received their battle cards. The real battle was about to begin. At this time, Nietian spread out his divine sense and sensed the surrounding crowd. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he thought to himself. As expected, there are many experts hidden in the periphery. The Dragon Blood martial art gathering had attracted many geniuses to participate. There were even people from the other 3 regions and the Sumeru spirit capital. These people were mostly geniuses from their families and sections. They definitely would not come alone. There must be people secretly protecting them. Just now, When Tion spread out his divine sense, he had already discovered many experts. It was just that he didn't know if these fellows hiding in the crowd would make a move when the genius disciples met and fought to the death with each other. After a while, Guki announced the start of the dragon blood martial art, causing the entire audience to be thunderous. When the entire audience calmed down, the referees of the various arenas walked up to the stage and drew lots to determine the order of the battles. In the first round, every participating martial artist would face 3 battles. If they lost all 3 battles, they would be directly eliminated. Tion estimated that after the first round, he should be able to eliminate a third of the participants. First match on the 7th stage, number 14 versus number 99. A cold voice sounded out. The referee of the 7th stage drew out 2 numbers and directly announced the start of the first round. I'm actually the first one on stage. I'm a little lucky. Tion looked at the battle card in his hand. It was number 14. The corner of his mouth curled up as he sighed in his heart. Number 99, I wonder which unlucky fellow is it. To meet Tion in the first round, this number 99 was indeed unlucky. Number 14, get out here and die. Just as the referee of stage 7 walked down the stage, a figure immediately rushed up, and with a deep and furious roar, a pair of sinister eyes swept across the crowd with an extremely domineering attitude. The appearance of this person immediately caused the surrounding people to discuss. Who is this person? How arrogant. You don't even know him. He's the 3rd prince of the Fengqin Empire. I heard that he's even on the Southern Mountain region's genius ranking. He seems to be ranked 37th. So he's a prince. No wonder he's so arrogant. Hearing the discussion, Tion couldn't help but be slightly startled. He raised his head to look at the face on the stage and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. At this moment, the person standing on the stage was no stranger to Tion. Furthermore, he was very familiar with him. It was actually the Fengqin Empire's Fengwuk. Before Tion came to the Heaven Luo city, Fengwuk had once barged into the Jin residence and even allowed his subordinates to kill one of the Jin residence's guards. Later on, 3 of his subordinates were killed by Qiushan. Even he himself almost died in Qiushan's hands. Tion had almost forgotten about this guy. He didn't expect to actually meet him at the Dragon Blood Martial meet. What a surprise. Tion lightly tapped his feet and appeared on the stage. However, his back was facing Fengwuk. He didn't waste any time and said indifferently, "Make your move." And Fengwuk was slightly startled. He felt that the figure and voice in front of him were somewhat familiar, but he couldn't recall who it was. "Why? You don't dare to make your move?" Tion spoke again. His tone was filled with dense mockery. On the high stage, Gu Yi and the others were all paying attention to Tion's battle. Big Brother Gu, City Lord Tion, is only at the 1st level of the Giant Spirit Realm. His opponent is also at the 1st level of the Giant Spirit Realm. Isn't he a little too confident by having his back facing his opponent? The Dan Martial Hall's 7th commander, Zhao Kuo, spoke in a loud voice. Everyone on the surrounding platforms could hear him. Too confident? Gu, he had a disapproving expression as he chuckled. "Brother, don't be anxious. Let's wait and see." Lu Liangkai, who was standing at the side, also frowned slightly. He felt that Tion was a little too arrogant. "Stinking brat, you're courting death." On the number 7 stage, Fengwuk's eyes were emitting anger. He had never suffered such humiliation before. He was instantly enraged as he let out a shout and struck out with his palm. Not only was Tion's back facing him, but he was also mocking him. This was intolerable for Fengwuk. When Fengwuk struck out with his palm, a giant palm shadow instantly appeared in the air. It almost covered the entire stage and pressed towards Tion. Tion stood at the same spot and didn't move an inch. He was like a firm boulder in the midst of a violent storm. When the rolling chi wave was 1 meter away from his body, Tion's body suddenly trembled. Instantly, a chilling sword light gushed out. The moment the sword light appeared, a terrifying sword chi surged out and directly shattered Fengwuk's giant palm shadow. PFFF. In the next moment, Feng Wuck didn't even have the time to react before he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. His entire body was like a kite that had its string cut as it flew off the arena and smashed onto the ground, causing a cloud of bloody dust to rise. After Feng Wuck landed on the ground, he got up and suddenly felt something was wrong. In the next moment, he cried out miserably, "Ah, my essence meridians! You crippled my essence meridians!"